Hey there, tonight we're uncovering what bread baking was like in ancient Greece, where bakers wielded more than just flour and fire. They had to navigate superstitions and sacred rituals not mentioned in the epic tales. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now find your comfort zone, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's venture into tonight's story together. If you've ever thought your mornings were tough, try waking up in ancient Greece, where the first task of the day isn't to check your notifications, but to get cracking on baking bread. Yes, before you can even dream of sipping a frothy cappuccino, you're already elbow deep in flour. And this isn't just any flour. We're talking ancient grains like emmer and barley. These grains were the backbone of the Greek diet, long before gluten-free became a thing. Now, before you can even think about baking, you need to gather your ingredients. This means a jaunt to the local agora, the bustling heart of ancient Greek city life. Picture it, merchants yelling out prices, the smell of fresh produce mingling with the less pleasant aroma of too many people in one place. The agora is where the action is, a marketplace and social hub rolled into one. It's like your local farmer's market, but with more togas. Today's mission, grains, specifically emmer and barley, the ancient equivalent of your standard wheat flour. Emmer, known as emeros in Greek, is a hardy grain that grows well in the rocky Greek soil. It's not the easiest to harvest, but beggars can't be choosers when it's one of the few grains that can withstand the Mediterranean climate. And then there's barley, which isn't just for ancient beer. It's a staple, often used in the form of marza, a type of barley cake that's as close to a power bar as you're going to get in 500 BC. But here's where things get interesting. Prices at the agora can be as unpredictable as a Greek tragedy. One day you might get a decent deal, but if there's a bad harvest or a war, which, let's be honest, happens more often than not, prices can skyrocket faster than you can say, Zeus Almighty. There's no Wall Street here, just the whims of nature and the ever-looming threat of conflict affecting your breakfast budget. Bread in ancient Greece isn't just food, it's a way of life. The Greeks eat it with practically everything. It's a status symbol too. A nice loaf of white bread signifies wealth, as the refined wheat it's made from is more expensive than the rougher, darker breads of the masses. So when you pull off a perfect loaf, you're not just feeding your family, you're making a statement. Let's bust a myth while we're at it. The idea of an idyllic, peaceful Greek life with leisurely breakfasts overlooking the Aegean. Not quite. The reality is more about survival, with bread as your daily sustenance. Grain shortages and high prices could mean the difference between full bellies and empty ones. It's a constant reminder that life in ancient Greece is as much about practicality as it is philosophy. So, with your grains in tow, you head back home ready to start the day's work. If you were hoping for a quick fix, think again. The process of turning grain into bread is labor-intensive and time-consuming. It's not just about throwing ingredients in a bowl and hoping for the best. This is a full-on workout that involves grinding the grains into flour using a mortar and pestle, or, if you're lucky, a hand-operated millstone. The Greeks didn't have the luxury of electric mixers or even standard ovens. Instead, they used clay ovens, which were essentially large parts that could hold the heat of a fire. Baking bread meant knowing your oven's quirks, how to get the temperature just right, how to not burn the bottom while leaving the top raw. It's an art form, no less. As you knead the dough, you're not just preparing food, you're connecting with a tradition that spans generations. Bread is the core of Greek culture, the foundation on which meals and social interactions are built. It's sustenance and symbolism all rolled into one. By the time you're done, you've worked up a sweat, and it's not even noon yet. But there's a certain satisfaction in knowing that you've done what your ancestors have been doing for centuries. You've created something from scratch, something that will nourish and sustain. It's a tangible link to the past that makes the effort worthwhile. So, as you set your dough to rise and take a moment to breathe, remember, this isn't just a morning routine. It's a testament to resilience and resourcefulness, a slice of history you can hold in your hands. And while the reality of ancient Greek life may lack the romantic sheen of legend, there's a certain beauty in the everyday struggle. What's more timeless than bread, after all? And just when you think you can finally catch your breath, it's time to get into the nitty-gritty of ancient Greek baking techniques. Let's be clear. There's no shiny KitchenAid mixer humming away on the counter. If you want dough, you're going to have to roll up your sleeves and dig in, literally. Welcome to the world of manual labor, where kneading is not just a skill, but an upper body workout that would make a modern-day CrossFit enthusiast blush. The art of kneading dough is all about rhythm and endurance. You're not just squishing flour and water together. You're developing gluten, which, in our modern world, is somewhat of a dietary villain. But in ancient Greece, gluten is your best friend, giving bread its structure and chewiness. It's a process that takes time, up to an hour of pushing, folding, and stretching. And if you think that sounds exhausting, remember, you're doing this every single day. Forget about leg day at the gym. This is the real deal. Once you've got your dough to the right consistency, it's time to shape it. Here's where the wooden paddles come in. These are your tools of the trade, used to give the bread its shape and help transfer it to the oven. Wooden paddles have the kind of rustic charm that makes for great Instagram posts today, but back then, they were pure practicality. You're not going to risk burning your hands in a communal oven that's harder than Hades, after all. Speaking of ovens, let's talk about those communal ovens. Imagine them as the ancient equivalent of fighting for the last treadmill at the gym during peak hours. These ovens are a social epicenter, where bakers from all over the neighborhood come to bake their loaves. It's first come, first served, and you better believe there's a bit of elbowing for the best spots. It's a scene not unlike a Black Friday sale, but instead of grabbing TVs, you're trying to secure a corner of the hearth. These clay ovens are marvels of engineering for their time, designed to maintain heat efficiently. But they're also fickle beasts. Too hard, and your bread turns into a charcoal briquette. Too cold, and you've got raw dough. It's a delicate balance, and mastering it is a badge of honor among bakers. You can almost hear the ancient equivalent of nailed it when someone pulls out a perfectly golden loaf. Now, let's debunk a common myth, the romanticized vision of the Greek baker as a serene artisan calmly tending to his loaves. In reality, this is a high-pressure gig. Baking is labor-intensive, with no shortcuts. It's not just about mixing ingredients and popping them in the oven. Each step requires focus and effort, from milling the grains to kneading the dough to wrestling with the communal oven. If you think modern chefs have it rough on cooking shows, they've got nothing on these ancient craftsmen. The economic stakes are high, too. Bread is a staple, a daily necessity that keeps families fed. But with fluctuating grain prices and the constant threat of crop failures or political upheavals, the cost of making bread can be as unpredictable as the weather. A bad harvest or a sudden spike in grain prices could mean the difference between profit and loss. In this world, bread isn't just food. It's currency, security, and survival. And let's not forget the social aspect. In ancient Greece, breaking bread is a communal affair. It's at the heart of gatherings, a symbol of hospitality and friendship. When you bring a loaf to a shared meal, you're not just providing sustenance. You're offering a piece of your own labor and effort. It's a gesture that says, I care enough to sweat for this. As you stand by the oven, waiting for your turn, you can't help but feel a part of something larger. This isn't just a chore. It's a ritual that connects you to your community and your ancestors. The scent of baking bread mingles with the chatter of neighbors, creating a tapestry of sounds and smells that's as comforting as it is chaotic. So, as you pull your loaf from the oven, golden and steaming, take a moment to appreciate the effort that went into it. This is more than just bread. It's a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. It's a reminder that despite the challenges and hard labor, there's a simple joy in creating something with your own hands. While the ancient Greek baker's life may not be the serene idyll of myth, there's a gritty beauty in the reality that endures through time. After all, in a world that can be as unpredictable as the Greek weather, what's more reliable than the satisfaction of a job well done? And just as you're admiring that steaming loaf, let's pivot to what this bread really means in the grand scheme of things. Spoiler alert, it's more than just carbs. In ancient Greece, bread is a social lubricant, an economic indicator, and a political hot potato all rolled into one. Forget about stocks and shares. If you want to gauge the health of a Greek city-state, just check the price of bread. When grain prices spike, political stability can crumble faster than a stale loaf. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of this economic ballet. The ancient Greek economy wasn't exactly the model of efficiency, and bread played a starring role in its drama. Picture this. A bad harvest comes along, and suddenly your morning barley cake costs as much as a small amphora of wine. The ripple effect, bread riots. Yes, actual riots. And if you think Twitter can stir up a ruckus, try a mob of hangry Greeks who've just discovered they can't afford their daily marza. In fact, the grain trade was so crucial that Athens, in its golden age, appointed officials called sidophilics to monitor it. These guys were like the ancient Greek version of the Federal Reserve, minus the suits and spreadsheets. Now, zoom in on the social scene. In a world where bread is king, it's also a great equalizer. Well, sort of. Let's not pretend ancient Greece was a bastion of equality. Your average Joe, or let's say your average Ion, chowed down on the coarser, darker breads made from barley. Meanwhile, the aristocrats flaunted their wealth with refined white bread, a luxury item that shouted, "I've got drachmas to burn." Bread wasn't just a meal, it was a socio-economic badge, a deliciously edible status symbol. Speaking of social hierarchies, let's talk about the role of women in all of this. In many Greek households, women were the unsung heroes of the baking process. They were like the original food bloggers, except with less avocado toast and more back-breaking labor. Grinding grain, kneading dough, monitoring the oven, it was all in a day's work. And while we're at it, let's debunk the myth of the idle Greek housewife. These women didn't just bake, they managed the household, cared for children, and let's be honest, probably never got a moment to themselves. Forget Netflix and chill, this was more like grind and toil. Bread making also had a crucial communal aspect. It wasn't just a domestic chore, it was a social event. The act of baking brought women together, a time to exchange news, gossip, and the occasional recipe tweak. If you've ever wondered where your neighborhood's juiciest rumors started, it was likely over the rhythmic thud of kneading dough. In a time without Facebook or WhatsApp, this was the original social network. Now, let's not forget the men. While women were the bread-baking dynamos, men often controlled the larger-scale grain trade, wielding power like Zeus with a thunderbolt. Merchant ships laden with grain sailed across the Aegean, bringing prosperity or disaster, depending on the winds and political climate. A well-timed shipment could fill bellies and coffers alike, while a delayed one could mean hunger and unrest. And speaking of unrest, let's circle back to the political implications. The phrase, bread and circuses, didn't originate in Greece, but the sentiment certainly applies. Leaders knew that keeping the populace fed was crucial for maintaining peace. If bread prices soared, so did the potential for revolt. It was a delicate dance, balancing supply and demand with the ever-present threat of political upheaval. A savvy leader could use bread to placate the masses, while an inept one might find himself facing a very literal uprising. As we take a metaphorical step back to admire the bigger picture, the reality is clear. Bread in ancient Greece was more than a staple. It was a symbol of power, of community, of survival. It was sustenance and status wrapped in a crusty package, as much a part of Greek identity as the Parthenon or the Olympic Games. And while the romantic image of a Greek baker serenely crafting loaves might hold some appeal, the truth is far more complex. It's a story of resilience, resourcefulness, and the relentless march of daily life. So, as you find yourself amidst the bustling agora once more, bartering for the next sack of grain, remember that you're participating in a tradition that's as old as civilization itself. Bread isn't just food, it's a legacy. And while we're far removed from those ancient ovens and the chatter of Greek markets, the echoes of those times continue to resonate. The struggles and triumphs of history, much like a loaf of bread, are best appreciated when shared. And that, my friend, is what makes history not just a series of dates and events, but a living, breathing narrative. Stay tuned, because there's more to this story than meets the eye or the palate. Now, as we navigate away from the agora's cacophony, let's pivot to the realm of the divine. In ancient Greece, bread wasn't just a staple. It was a cosmic currency, a bridge between mortals and gods. Yes, we're talking divine carbs here. Bread was central to rituals and festivals, acting as an edible offering to the Olympian deities, especially Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. This wasn't your average Sunday brunch. It was a full-on feast for the gods, with bread as the guest of honor. Picture the Eleusinian Mysteries, one of the most secretive and significant religious festivals of the time, held in honor of Demeter and her daughter Persephone. These annual rites were the coach-sheller of ancient Greece, drawing pilgrims from across the Greek world. Attendees would partake in sacred rituals, with bread serving as a key symbol of life, death, and rebirth. Demeter, after all, was credited with teaching humanity the art of agriculture, so offering her bread was a no-brainer. But let's not get too misty-eyed about these sacred loaves. While the festival was about as mystical as it gets, it also underscored a harsh truth. The Greeks were at the mercy of the harvest. In an era without modern farming techniques or reliable weather forecasts, a bad crop could spell disaster. The rituals weren't just spiritual insurance. They were a desperate plea to Demeter for a good harvest. It was like sending up a divine Yelp review, hoping for a 5-star growing season. Of course, bread was part of more than just Demeter's fan club. The Greeks were equal opportunity ritualists, using bread in ceremonies across the religious spectrum. Festivals like the Maurya, dedicated to the fertility of the land and women, featured bread prominently. Women would bake phallic-shaped loaves, because let's face it, the ancients weren't exactly subtle, and offer them in rituals that were a mix of solemnity and bawdy humor. It's like a fertility clinic and a comedy club rolled into one. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the romanticized vision of these festivals as idyllic communal gatherings. The reality, not so much. Behind the veneer of sacred celebration lurked the grim specter of food scarcity. The success of these rituals often hinged on the whims of nature. A failed harvest meant empty granaries, and suddenly the holy bread you were offering was the same bread you were struggling to put on your own table. It's hard to feel spiritually fulfilled when you're also nutritionally deprived. Economic factors weighed heavily on these celebrations too. The cost of grain was as volatile as a soap opera plot twist. A sudden spike in prices could turn a community festival into an exercise in austerity. And while the wealthy could afford to keep the bread offerings flowing, the average citizen faced tough choices. Do you offer your best loaf to the gods, or do you save it for your own family's survival? It was a divine dilemma, one that highlighted the stark realities of ancient life. Despite these challenges, the Greeks didn't just see bread as a religious token. It was also a social linchpin. Take the symposium, for instance, an elite drinking party where bread played a supporting role to wine. Here, bread wasn't just a sop for the alcohol. It was a symbol of hospitality and camaraderie. Sharing bread at a symposium was a way of forging bonds, of saying, we're in this together, pass the olive oil. And let's not forget the everyday acts of offering bread to travelers and guests, a practice deeply embedded in Greek culture. Hospitality was a sacred duty, one that transcended social and economic status. Offering bread to a stranger was more than kindness. It was a reflection of the Greek ethos, where the lines between the sacred and the profane often blurred like a watercolor painting in the rain. Yet, as with all things Greek, the practice was fraught with contradictions. While bread was a symbol of abundance and generosity, it was also a reminder of scarcity and struggle. The Greeks lived in a world where the next meal was never guaranteed, where a bad harvest could mean the difference between feast and famine. In this light, bread was both a blessing and a burden, a testament to human resilience in the face of nature's whims. So, as the afternoon sun dips lower and the scent of baking bread mingles with the sea breeze, it's clear that in ancient Greece, bread was more than just food. It was a cultural cornerstone, a religious offering, and a symbol of survival. It was the glue that held communities together through times of plenty and times of want. And while the myths may paint a picture of divine feasts and endless bounty, the truth was far more complex and infinitely more human. Stay tuned, because the story of bread in ancient Greece doesn't end here. There's more to explore, more myths to debunk, and more truths to uncover. After all, history is a living narrative, it's rich and layered as a freshly baked loaf. As the sun sets over ancient Greece, casting long shadows across the landscape, let's take a moment to reflect on the journey of bread from field to table. This isn't just a culinary adventure. It's a microcosm of Greek life itself, where every grain of emmer and barley tells a story of survival, community, and the ever-present dance with fate. Think of it as a daily grind with existential overtones, because in ancient Greece, bread wasn't just on the menu. It was the headline act. You see, in a world where the gods seem to have a hand in everything from the weather to your love life, the journey from seed to loaf mirrored the broader themes of Greek existence. It was a testament to the grit and resilience needed to thrive in a land where the earth was as rocky as the politics. From the back-breaking labor of sowing and harvesting to the communal hustle of baking in clay ovens. Bread was a constant reminder that life was an intricate balance of toil, luck, and the occasional divine intervention. But let's not get too carried away on the wings of nostalgia. The reality was often less poetic and more pragmatically challenging. The Greek farmer, for instance, was at the mercy of nature's whims, much like a sailor in the Aegean. A good year meant full granaries and festive tables, while a bad year spurred desperate pleas to the gods and creative rationing at home. This delicate balance between feast and famine was a dance that required both skill and a healthy dose of superstition. As we roll into the legacy of this ancient bread-making odyssey, it's clear that the echoes of Greek baking have reverberated through history to our modern kitchens. Today's artisanal bread movement, with its emphasis on ancient grains and traditional techniques, is a nod to those early bakers who knew their emmer from their elbow. The resurgence of sourdough and the celebration of slow fermentation can be traced back to the clay ovens and hand-kneaded loaves of our Greek ancestors. It's a culinary tradition that's as much about flavor as it is about connecting with a past that's never fully left us. So why does this history matter? Because, my dear friend, in understanding the bread of ancient Greece, we uncover the layers of human experience baked into every loaf. These stories of agriculture and baking are tales of innovation and tenacity, of communities bound together by the shared struggle to wrest sustenance from the earth. They remind us that despite the passage of millennia, the fundamental challenges of feeding a family and feeding a society remain remarkably constant. Let's have a laugh at the modern parallels. Today's bread controversies, gluten-free diets, carb counting, and the artisanal bread boom are just new chapters in the age-old saga of bread's role in our lives. While we no longer barter for barley at the agora or offer loaves to appease the gods, we still find ourselves navigating the complexities of food politics and societal trends. Bread, it seems, is as much a part of our cultural DNA as ever, a delicious thread that stitches together past and present. As we wrap up this journey through the ancient Greek world of bread, let's savor the surprising connections between then and now. In the end, the story of Greek baking is not just about the loaves themselves, but about the people who crafted them, people who faced uncertainty with ingenuity and a pinch of humor. They remind us that history, like a well-kneaded dough, is full of potential to rise and surprise. And as you close your eyes tonight, perhaps with the scent of fresh-baked bread still teasing your senses, remember this. History isn't just a series of dates and dusty artifacts. It's a living, breathing narrative rich with lessons and laughter. So next time you break bread, think of the Greeks who walked before you, their hands dusty with flour, their hearts full of hope. Because in the grand tapestry of time, bread, like history, always rises to the occasion. As the first slivers of dawn light creep through the cracks in your cottage walls, you're abruptly yanked from sleep by the gentle yet insistent bleating of your neighbor's goat. Congratulations, you're a peasant in Tudor England, where livestock are your alarm clock, and your mattress is barely more than a collection of straw and old rags. You wake up on something that makes a modern futon look like the height of luxury. And yes, you're cramped. Smoky Cottage is home's sweet home. For you and probably half a dozen other family members, give or take a cousin or two. This cottage isn't exactly winning any architectural awards. It's about 10 by 20 feet, give or take a couple of feet, depending on how generous your lord's feeling. The walls, if you could call them that, are made of wattle and daub, which is a fancy way of saying sticks and mud. It's the kind of place where you can hear your neighbors snoring through the walls. But hey, that sense of community is what makes it all worthwhile, right? Now, let's have a quick chat about sanitation, or the medieval version of it, which is basically non-existent. The concept of indoor plumbing is a distant fantasy, so relieving yourself involves a trip to the charmingly named privy, essentially a hole in the ground that you and your fellow villagers share. Forget about toilet paper. You're likely reaching for whatever leaves or moss are handy. If this sounds a bit grim, you're not wrong, but it's not all doom and gloom. After all, where else can you enjoy nature while attending to nature's call? Breakfast is not exactly a continental buffet, but it gets the job done. You're starting your day with bread and pottage, a thick, hearty stew that makes up about 80% of your diet. Bread's your staple, and it's usually made from rye or barley, depending on the season. Wheat bread. That's a luxury item for the rich folks, the kind of delicacy you might dream about but rarely see. Pardage, on the other hand, is a concoction of whatever's growing in your garden or foraged from the woods: cabbage, onions, maybe a carrot if you're lucky. Meat is a rarity, so when you do get to throw a bone into the pot, it's cause for celebration. Here's where we hit pause to debunk the myth of the eternally miserable peasant. Sure, your life includes back-breaking work and questionable hygiene standards, but there's a certain grit and resilience that comes with the territory. The community spirit is strong, and there's a kind of camaraderie in shared hardships. You work together, eat together, and yes, even party together when the occasion calls for it. Picture this. After a long day, you might gather around a fire, share stories, and have a laugh at the Lord's expense. There's a toughness to peasant life that's often overshadowed by grand tales of knights and ladies, while literature often paints you as the merry peasant, always ready for a jig and a mug of ale. Reality is a bit more nuanced. The merriment comes in bursts, often as a hard-earned reprieve from relentless labor. You're living on the edge, where a bad harvest or an illness can tip the scales from survival to desperation. Yet there's a kind of joy in the simple things: a good harvest, a healthy child, a rare feast day. The resilience isn't just in surviving, but in finding pockets of happiness amid the grind. So, as you chew on your bread and sip your porridge, take a moment to appreciate the unique tapestry of your Tudor life. It's a mix of hardship and hope, a community bound by shared experiences, and quite literally, shared walls. This morning routine might not be everyone's cup of ale, but it's yours, and there's something to be said for that. Now, it's time to roll up your sleeves and dive into the day's work, because in the Tudor era, the sun is your only timekeeper, and it's not waiting around for anyone. So, you wipe your mouth and set off for another day of being a cog in the grand Tudor agricultural machine. Out you go, the fields where your life depends on the whims of weather and the Lord's mood. Now, let's talk about the big boss of your daily grind, agriculture. Forget the romantic notion of pastoral simplicity. This is a high-stakes game of survival where knowledge is power, and ignorance could very well be a death sentence. First up, the open field system. Imagine a patchwork quilt spread over the countryside, parceled into long, narrow strips that you and your fellow peasants work on communally. There's no privacy here, folks. Everyone knows how good or bad you are at your job. You've got your own strips to till, but you're also collectively responsible for the whole field. It's like a group project where everyone's grade depends on you not slacking off, except instead of a bad grade, it's starvation. And what about crop rotation? It's not just a fancy term to impress history buffs. This was your lifeline. You're alternating between crops like barley, oats, and peas, and leaving a portion of the land fallow each year. Why? Because exhausting the soil means no crops, and no crops mean no food. Forget about a bumper harvest if you don't let Mother Nature catch a break now and then. This wasn't just farming. It was early environmentalism with survival at its core. You're armed with a handful of rudimentary tools. The plow. It's a beast of wood and iron, requiring a team effort to operate. No John Deere magic here. You've got harrows to break up clods, scythes for cutting, and sickles for harvesting. It's a hands-on, everything's manual kind of world. And don't forget those oxen. They're your living tractors, and if one of them goes lame, well, you're in a world of trouble. But let's bust a myth while we're here. The idea of the simple peasant life, with you lazily strolling through fields of wheat, is about as real as a unicorn siding. This is back-breaking labor, from sunrise to sunset, in all weather. You need the skills of a botanist, the strength of a weightlifter, and the patience of a saint, none of which are paid professions in Tudor England. One bad decision, one unanticipated frost, and it's not just your family looking at an empty pantry. It's the whole village. And that's when the lord of the manor starts sniffing around, demanding his due. Speaking of the manor lord, this guy is both your landlord and local enforcer. Fail to meet your obligations, and you might face fines, extra labor, or worse. It's not just a matter of losing favor, it's about losing your livelihood. So while there's camaraderie among your fellow farmers, there's also an ever-present undercurrent of competition and fear. Miss a planting season or botch a harvest, and it's not just bad luck. It's a potential catastrophe. Now, let's dive into the communal aspect. You're not just farming for yourself. You're part of a collective. That means decisions aren't made in isolation. Everyone's in this together, whether you like it or not. Fields are shared, tools are often communal, and if someone's cow wanders into your cabbage patch, well, it's up to the village to sort it out. There's no room for lone wolves here. It's an early exercise in socialism or an exercise in collective frustration, depending on who you ask. This is where we tip our hats to the unsung heroes of the Tudor age, the women. While you're out there ploughing and sowing, they're managing the household, the children, and often a significant portion of the farm work. From milking cows to brewing ale and spinning wool, their list of chores reads like a medieval multitasking nightmare. It's a family affair, and everyone pulls their weight, or else. Your life is a constant balancing act between the demands of the seasons and the dictates of the manor. Miss the window to plant or harvest, and it's not just a bad day, it's a bad year. And in the Tudor world, a bad year can mean the difference between a full stomach and famine. As you slog through the fields, you're acutely aware of the stakes. This isn't just about putting food on the table, it's about survival. The agricultural calendar rules your life, from ploughing in the spring to sowing in the autumn, with each season bringing its own challenges and opportunities. It's a relentless cycle, and there's no opting out. So, as you push the plough and wipe the sweat from your brow, remember this. The simple rural life was anything but simple. It required grit, determination, and a hefty dose of luck. You're part of a centuries-old tradition, a living testament to the resilience and ingenuity of those who came before you. And while the hardships are many, there's a certain pride in knowing that you're the backbone of society, feeding the nation one crop at a time. It's not a glamorous life, but it's yours, and that's worth something. So, as you push the plough and wipe the sweat from your brow, you finally hear the sweet chimes signaling midday. This isn't just the Tudor version of a lunch break. It's a well-earned pause in the relentless grind of survival. Picture this not as a leisurely picnic, but more like refueling a car in the middle of a race. You've got a quick reprieve to shovel some bread and pottage into your mouth and catch your breath before diving back into the fields. But let's not just linger at the table. It's time to venture into the heart of the village and meet the cast of characters who make this Tudor tapestry a vibrant, albeit gritty, masterpiece. First up, the blacksmith. This isn't just some guy with a hammer and anvil. He's the medieval equivalent of a tech guru, the one with the skills to keep everything from your plough to your part in working order. Without the blacksmith, you're pretty much stuck with dull blades and broken tools, which is akin to a modern-day Wi-Fi outage, a catastrophe. Then there's the midwife, the unsung heroine of the village. In a world where medical knowledge often involved equal parts superstition and guts, she's the goda for bringing new life into the world. Forget about hospitals or epidurals. This is hands-on, old-school midwifery. The midwife's role is critical, not just for delivering babies, but also for tending to those occasional, let's call them oopsies, when things go awry during childbirth. In an era where maternal mortality rates were alarmingly high, she's the difference between life and death, quite literally. Now, let's talk about the church. The medieval church, part sanctuary, part social media platform, and part Big Brother. It's where you go not just to save your soul, but to catch up on the latest gossip and news. The church is the village social hub, a place where you find out who's getting married, who's been excommunicated, and who's been caught stealing chickens. It's a blend of spiritual guidance and community bulletin board, and missing a service is like skipping the biggest event of the week. But before we get too cozy with this idea of a tight-knit community, let's peel back the layers. The village might seem like one big happy family, but it's a family with some serious issues. Social hierarchies are rigid, and stepping out of line can lead to swift consequences. There's a pecking order, and you better know your place in it. If you're caught with your hand in the Lord's cookie jar, metaphorically or literally, you might find yourself facing fines or worse, depending on how the Lord's feeling that day. Justice is swift and often brutal, a reminder that harmony comes at a cost. And speaking of costs, let's dive into the village economy. Forget about wallets bursting with cash. This is a barter-driven world. Currency, when it appears, is often in the form of rare coins that you're more likely to stash away than spend. Your primary mode of transaction is trade. Got surplus eggs. Maybe the blacksmith needs some and is willing to swap for a new plowshare. It's an intricate dance of needs and offers, a marketplace without the market. But let's not romanticize the barter system too much. It's less about charming exchanges and more about survival tactics. There's no room for generosity when everyone's just trying to scrape by. A bad harvest or sick livestock can send those carefully balanced scales tumbling, and suddenly you're scrambling to trade whatever you can spare for essentials. Money might be scarce, but it's the barter that keeps the village pulse ticking. Yet, even in this barter economy, you're not entirely free from the clutches of money. Some things just can't be bartered. The Lord's taxes are often paid in cash, and failing to meet these demands can spell disaster. So while coins are rare, they're also indispensable when it comes to keeping your head above water. As you navigate these social and economic dynamics, it becomes clear that the idyllic vision of a pastoral village is more of a myth than reality. Sure, there's camaraderie and community, but there's also competition and conflict. The village is a microcosm of the Tudor world, with all its complexity and contradictions. And let's not overlook the power dynamics at play. The lord of the manor isn't just a figurehead. He's the ultimate authority, holding the power to make or break lives on a whim. It's a delicate balance between deference and defiance, knowing when to bow and when to barter. So, as you wrap up your midday break and prepare to head back to the fields, remember this. Life in a Tudor village is as much about navigating social minefields as it is about agricultural ones. It's a world where every decision counts, every relationship matters, and every day is a new chapter in the ongoing saga of survival. The myth of the simple, tight-knit community may have its allure, but the reality is far more intriguing. You're not just a peasant, you're a player in a grand, historical drama with all its triumphs and trials. And as the afternoon sun beckons you back to your toil, you carry this understanding like an invisible badge, a testament to the complexity and resilience of the human spirit. As you march back to the fields, the sun now a relentless overseer in the sky, let's dive into the delightful quagmire of Tudor economics, where your hard-earned crops face the tyranny of taxes, tithes, and the whims of the local lord. Now, the idea of paying for the privilege of existing might seem absurd, but welcome to the 16th century, where absurdity is practically a national pastime. First up, let's talk taxes. Oh, the joys of being taxed into poverty. Imagine working your fingers to the bone, only to watch a chunk of your harvest carted off to finance wars you never voted for. Henry Roman VIII, a king with a penchant for matrimonial musical chairs, had a particular knack for this. His foreign escapades, like the costly Italian wars, demanded funds, and guess where those funds came from? That's right, your modest fields. It's as if your meager income is being siphoned into a royal Black Friday shopping spree, and you're not even getting a discount. Now, tack on tithes to this grim picture. The church, with its insatiable appetite, expects you to fork over 1/10 of your produce. This isn't just pocket change, it's a significant chunk of your livelihood. In a time where every grain counts, you're left with the hope that divine intervention might one day come with a rebate. Yet, missing a tithe payment isn't just frowned upon, it's a one-way ticket to social and spiritual purgatory. The church isn't just spiritual guidance, it's the medieval IRS, and they don't offer payment plans. Now, you might think the local nobility could offer some respite, but think again. Your lord, that charming blend of landlord and local despot, has his own demands. He might decide on a whim that he needs a new tapestry or a bigger reception hall. Guess who's footing the bill? It's like having a landlord who not only demands rent, but also expects you to pay for his Netflix subscription. You're working to maintain his lavish lifestyle, even as you struggle to keep your own family fed. But let's spice up this stew of economic woes with a splash of political upheaval. Henry Roman VIII dissolution of the monasteries, a move driven by his break from Rome and a desire to replenish his coffers, had a profound impact on your life. The monasteries were more than religious centers. They were economic and social lifelines, providing charity, education, and even employment. When they were dismantled, those services vanished, leaving a gaping hole in the social safety net. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of cutting public services to fund a royal yacht. This upheaval didn't go unchallenged. The Pilgrimage of Grace in 1536 was one of the largest uprisings against Henry's policies, a northern rebellion born out of religious and economic dissatisfaction. Thousands of peasants, gentry, and clergy marched in protest, their loyalty tested by a king who seemed more concerned with divorces than his subjects' welfare. Of course, the rebellion was quashed, but it served as a stark reminder that beneath the veneer of loyalty lay a simmering discontent. Now, let's debunk the myth of the ever-loyal subject. Sure, loyalty was expected, but it was often more about survival than devotion. You didn't support the king because you loved him. You did it because the alternative was usually a swift execution. In reality, peasants were pragmatic, navigating the treacherous waters of politics with the skill of a seasoned sailor. They knew when to bow and when to grumble quietly over their partage. As the afternoon wears on and you toil under the demanding gaze of the sun, consider this. Your life is a high-wire act, balancing the demands of survival with the pressures of authority. It's a constant negotiation between paying what's due and keeping enough to sustain your family. The romanticized notion of a simple, pastoral life is about as real as a dragon in your cabbage patch. What you have is a gritty, raw, and complex existence, one that requires resilience and cunning just to make it from one day to the next. And yet, amid the chaos, there's a certain grit and determination that defines your world. You're not just a passive player in this historical drama. You're a survivor, navigating the whims of kings and the demands of the land with a tenacity that defies the odds. It's a testament to the human spirit, to our ability to adapt and endure, even when the deck seems perpetually stacked against us. As you glance at the descending sun, signaling the approach of evening, you're reminded that each day is a triumph of perseverance over adversity. You might not have the luxury of choice, but you have the strength to endure, and that's no small feat in the grand tapestry of history. The tale of the Tudor peasant is not just one of hardship, it's one of survival, grit, and an unwavering will to live another day. As evening casts its shadow over the fields, you find yourself trudging back to the village, muscles aching from a day's labor. The sun finally decides to call it a night, and so do you. But don't get too comfortable. The day's not over yet. It's time to swap your plough for a pint and head to the alehouse, the Tudor equivalent of happy hour, minus the cocktails and appetizers. Now, before you imagine a scene straight out of a medieval sitcom, let's lay down some facts. The alehouse is less about sophisticated socializing and more about communal survival. Think of it as the village living room, where stories are swapped like currency and ale flows like, well, the only affordable beverage. Here, the gossip is as thick as the brew, and you finally get to catch up on the latest village scandals. Who needs Netflix when you've got the entertaining drama of who got caught with their hand in the pie? Literally. But let's not pretend this is all fun and froth. Alehouses are an escape hatch from reality, a rare chance to let loose in a world that often feels like it's conspiring against you. The ale isn't just a drink, it's liquid camaraderie, a way to soften the harsh edges of life. And in a society where the water can give you a one-way ticket to the afterlife, ale is not just preferred, it's a public health strategy. As you sip your drink, let's take a moment to debunk the myth of the simple country life. Yes, there's community spirit, but it's born from necessity, not choice. In a realm where survival hinges on cooperation, the village operates like a dysfunctional family. You might not like everyone, but you need them. There's no room for lone wolves here. It's all hands on deck just to keep the ship afloat. And while the alehouse gatherings are a respite, they're also a reminder of the precarious balance you're all trying to maintain. Now, if you're lucky, you might even stumble onto a festival. Forget the sanitized, Instagram-ready events of today. These are gritty, chaotic affairs that make modern rock concerts look tame. Festivals are the rare moments when the village collectively decides to forget its woes and celebrate survival itself. There's music, dancing, and enough merriment to make even the grimmest of Tudors crack a smile. But remember, it's a fleeting joy, a brief interlude before the grind resumes. So, what's the grand takeaway from this daily tapestry of toil and occasional triumph? It's resilience, my friend. Your life is a masterclass in adapting to adversity. You're not just surviving, you're thriving in a world where the odds are perpetually stacked against you. It's a relentless cycle of sowing, reaping, and surviving, all under the watchful eyes of lords and nature alike. The romantic notion of the merry peasant is, in reality, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to find joy amid chaos. But let's not gloss over the hardships. The Tudor countryside is no idyllic haven. It's a battleground of economic pressures, social hierarchies, and unpredictable elements. Yet within this harsh landscape, there are moments of genuine connection and community. These aren't just quaint stories. They're reflections of a society that, despite its constraints, found ways to celebrate life's small victories. And what about those festivals? They're not just an excuse for revelry. They're a vital pressure valve for a community under constant strain. They remind you that while life may be a grind, it's a grind shared with others who understand your struggles. It's a collective exhale, a moment to remember that life, despite its challenges, can still be celebrated. So, as you finish your ale and prepare to head home, let's reflect on the legacy of the Tudor peasant. It's a story of survival, yes, but also one of endurance and adaptability. You're a part of history's unyielding backbone, a testament to the fortitude that defines the human experience. While the modern world may offer conveniences undreamt of in your time, the core of your existence, resilience, community, and survival, echoes through the ages. As you step out into the cool night air, you take with you the lessons of the day. Your place in Tudor society may be humble, but it's essential. You're a living reminder that even in the harshest conditions, people find ways to endure, to connect, and to celebrate the fleeting joys of life. It's a legacy that resonates across centuries, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who came before us. And so, as the stars take their place in the sky, you head home, your path illuminated by the faint glow of moonlight. You carry with you the knowledge that while the world may change, the essence of human resilience remains. It's a comforting thought, a reminder that no matter the era, the human spirit finds a way to shine through the darkness. So sleep well, Tudor peasant, and dream of the possibilities tomorrow might bring. India in 323 BCE was like a Game of Thrones, minus the dragons and ice zombies, but with plenty of chaos. Picture a region that had just been graced by the whirlwind that was Alexander the Great. Yes, the same Alexander who had a knack for conquering territories, and then leaving them like a rock star trashing a hotel room, messy and in disarray. After his departure, the subcontinent was left with a power vacuum so big you could park an army in it. Think about it. Alexander had rolled in with his Macedonian blitzkrieg, leaving the local kings either crushed, confused, or just plain cranky. His exit was a bit like a mic drop, leaving the stage wide open for anyone ambitious or crazy enough to seize the spotlight. And let's be honest, India was no stranger to regional fragmentation. The patchwork quilt of kingdoms, each ruled by their own brand of despot, it was a political free-for-all. Enter Chandragupta Maurya, a young man who saw opportunity in chaos, like a chess player looking at an opponent's sloppy board. Chandragupta wasn't just another wannabe king. He was a visionary with a plan as grand as his ambition. But even visionaries need a little help, and that's where Chanakya comes in. Think of him as the Gandalf to Chandragupta's Frodo, minus the magical fireworks and long grey beard. Chanakya was a scholar, a strategist, and quite frankly, a bit of a schemer. If Machiavelli had an ancient Indian cousin, it would have been Chanakya. The scene was set for a power duo that would make Batman and Robin look like amateurs. Chandragupta, with his youthful energy, and Chanakya, with his razor-sharp intellect, were about to change the game. They didn't just want to play, they intended to rewrite the rules. Now, Chandragupta wasn't picking up a kingdom at a garage sale. No, he was looking to build an empire, and for that he needed more than just muscle. He needed a strategy that could outsmart and outmaneuver the fragmented forces of his homeland. Luckily, Chanakya had a few tricks up his sleeve, and one of them was the Artha Shastra, his magnum opus on statecraft, economics, and military strategy. This was no bedtime reading. It was a blueprint for empire building. The duo understood that the fragmented nature of the Indian subcontinent was both a challenge and an opportunity. The regions were like a jigsaw puzzle, broken yet full of potential if you knew how to put the pieces together. The Maurya Empire was about to rise not just through brute force, but through the cunning application of diplomacy, espionage, and a little bit of old-fashioned intrigue. It's easy to romanticize this as a heroic endeavor, but let's not kid ourselves. The formation of the Maurya Empire was as much about ruthless pragmatism as it was about visionary leadership. Chandragupta and Chanakya weren't afraid to play dirty when the situation demanded it. They knew that in the Game of Thrones, you win or you end up as a footnote in history. With the Macedonian vacuum looming large, Chandragupta began his campaign in the northwestern territories, a region ripe for the picking after Alexander's generals had packed up their bags. Chandragupta's early moves were bold, taking on the remnants of Greek satrapies and local rulers who had grown complacent in the power shuffle. It was a classic case of carpe diem, seizing the day with a gusto that would make even Julius Caesar nod in approval. What's fascinating is that Chandragupta didn't come from a lineage of kings. Nope, he was a commoner, a Maurya, which back then meant he wasn't exactly born with a silver spoon in his mouth. This wasn't a story of inherited thrones, but of earned crowns. The allure of such a narrative is undeniable, even if it's tinged with a bit of myth. Some say he was a child of destiny, others whisper tales of prophecy, but in reality it was a mix of determination, clever alliances, and a knack for seizing the right moment. As the political landscape shifted, Maurya duo engaged in a series of campaigns that weren't just about expanding territory, but also consolidating power. They understood that a vast empire could crumble as quickly as it rose if it wasn't built on solid foundations. So, they set out to create a centralized administration that would bind their new territories together, a novel concept in a land accustomed to regional rule. Their approach was meticulous, with Chanakya orchestrating a network of spies, diplomats, and enforcers to ensure loyalty and efficiency. This wasn't just about conquering land, it was about forging a political machine that could endure. And endure it did, laying the groundwork for what would become one of the largest empires in Indian history. Chandragupta's rise was not without its challenges. There were betrayals, battles, and more than a few close calls. Yet with Chanakya's guidance, he navigated these treacherous waters, proving that a sharp mind could be as deadly as a sharp sword. Their partnership was a testament to the power of collaboration, showing that behind every great leader is a great strategist, whispering advice and plotting the next move. So, as the Maurya Empire began to spread its wings across the subcontinent, it was clear that a new era was dawning. This wasn't just about a change in leadership. It was a fundamental shift in the way power was understood and exercised. The story of Chandragupta and Chanakya is a reminder that history is often shaped not just by the might of armies, but by the minds of those who dare to dream big and act even bigger. And as they stood on the brink of creating an empire, the world was about to witness a transformation that would echo through the ages. And so, as the Maurya Empire began its audacious spread, it was clear Chandragupta was not merely assembling a kingdom. He was orchestrating a symphony of conquest across the Indian subcontinent. The man was on a roll, and his next move was the strategic equivalent of playing chess in 4 dimensions. His eyes were set on the Nanda dynasty, a formidable power in eastern India. Now, the Nandas were not your run-of-the-mill rulers. They were wealthy, with a treasury rumored to be bursting at the seams. Think of them as the Scrooge McDuck of ancient India. The Nandas, with their moneybags and military might, were a real obstacle, more of a fortress than a mere speed bump on Chandragupta's path to glory. But here's the twist. The Nandas were also wildly unpopular. They had the charm of a rusty nail and the public relations skills of a porcupine. This unpopularity was Chandragupta's golden ticket. You see, even a dynasty as rich as the Nandas couldn't buy love, and that's where Chanakya's genius came into play. Chanakya, ever the puppet master, knew that brute force wasn't the only way to topple a giant. He orchestrated a propaganda campaign that would make modern spin doctors take notes. The Nandas were painted as tyrants, their excesses magnified and broadcast far and wide. It was the ancient equivalent of a smear campaign, and it worked wonders. Discontent festered, and when Chandragupta finally moved against them, he wasn't just leading an army. He was spearheading a revolution. The decisive battle came around 321 BCE, and it wasn't just about military prowess. It was a perfect storm of strategy, timing, and sheer audacity. Chandragupta's forces clashed with the Nandas in a campaign that was as much about psychological warfare as it was about swords and spears. The Nandas, despite their wealth and numbers, found themselves outmaneuvered, their forces demoralized, and their once thriving dynasty crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. With the Nandas defeated, Chandragupta didn't just inherit a throne, he acquired an empire-building kit. The Mauryan Empire was officially in business, and business was booming. But here's the kicker. Conquering land is one thing, governing it is another beast entirely. Chandragupta understood that maintaining control required more than just military might. It needed a centralized administration as intricate and precise as a Swiss watch. Enter the Mauryan bureaucracy, a system so detailed would make modern accountants swoon. Chandragupta and Chanakya devised a network of provincial governors, tax collectors, and spies that kept the empire humming like a well-oiled machine. The Arthashastra, Chanakya's magnum opus, served as their guidebook, outlining everything from economic policies to espionage tactics. This wasn't governance by whim. It was administration by design. Now let's talk economics, because empires don't run on good intentions. Taxation was the lifeblood of the Mauryan state, and Chandragupta knew how to squeeze a rupee until it begged for mercy. Land taxes, trade tariffs, and even a levy on goods like salt and liquor filled the imperial coffers, funding everything from armies to infrastructure. This wasn't just about bleeding the populace dry. It was about creating a sustainable revenue stream that could support an empire of unprecedented scale. Chandragupta's economic strategies were as innovative as they were ruthless. Agriculture was the backbone of the economy, and the Mauryans implemented state-sponsored irrigation projects that increased crop yields and, by extension, tax revenues. Trade flourished under their rule, with roads and trade routes snaking across the subcontinent, linking the empire's far-flung provinces. The Mauryans even minted their own currency, standardizing transactions and further bolstering the economy. Of course, no empire worth its salt can ignore the military, and Chandragupta's was a force to be reckoned with. The Mauryan army was a diverse assembly of infantry, cavalry, and war elephants, a pachyderm-powered tank division that struck terror into the hearts of enemies. And let's not forget the navy, because yes, the Mauryans had one of those too, patrolling the waters and safeguarding trade routes. It was an all-encompassing military machine, funded by Chandragupta's shrewd economic policies and kept sharp by constant training and innovation. But let's not romanticize this as a tale of benevolent rulers and happy subjects. The Mauryan Empire was, in many ways, a ruthless enterprise. The centralized administration that ensured efficiency also enforced control, and dissent was met with swift retribution. Spies were everywhere, and loyalty was a currency traded more carefully than gold. Chandragupta and Chanakya understood that an empire was only as strong as its weakest link, and they were determined to leave no links weak. Yet, in the brutal pragmatism of it all, there was a certain elegance to their design. The Mauryan Empire was a marvel of organization, a testament to what can be achieved when ambition meets intellect and opportunity. It was a juggernaut of power that rolled across the subcontinent, reshaping the political landscape and laying the groundwork for future generations. As we leave Chandragupta on his imperial throne, it's worth pondering the legacy he crafted. The Mauryans were not just conquerors. They were architects of a new order. Their story is a reminder that history is often written by those who dare to think big and act even bigger. With the Nandas vanquished and the subcontinent unified under a single banner, the Mauryan Empire was a testament to the power of vision, strategy, and a little bit of luck. But remember, the story doesn't conclude here. There's still more to explore about the rise and reign of India's first dynasty. The Mauryan Empire was just getting started, and its impact would reverberate long after Chandragupta's time. Stay tuned, because the saga of the Mauryas is far from over, and history has more twists and turns than a river through the Indian plains. Just as the ink dries on Chandragupta's triumphs, enter Bindusara, his son, ready to take the reins of the Mauryan Empire. A daunting task, like inheriting a perfectly built model train set, but knowing one wrong move could send it all crashing down. Bindusara had a rare talent for dynastic history. He managed to keep the empire running smoothly without the kind of drama that typically makes history books juicy. Imagine running an empire as big as the Mauryan one, spanning most of the Indian subcontinent, and doing it with the same coolness as a seasoned air traffic controller. Bindusara, often overshadowed by his more famous relatives, deserves a closer look. Born around 320 BCE, he ascended to power in 297 BCE and ruled for about 25 years. The empire was already a colossal beast with its sprawling territories, but Bindusara had the acumen to nurture this beast instead of letting it go feral. His reign was marked by administrative efficiency and economic prosperity, which in the world of empires are essentially the holy grail. Now, let's talk administration. Bindusara knew that a finely tuned bureaucracy was vital. He maintained the centralized system set up by Chandragupta and Chanakya, but with his own flair. This meant keeping the empire's arteries, aka roads and communication lines, unclogged and flowing. Provincial governors, or Mahamadiyas, were the linchpins of this system. They ensured local affairs didn't devolve into chaos, acting like the empire's very own neighborhood watch. And here's a fun fact. Bindusara's administration was so efficient that it could collect taxes on time, an impressive feat considering even modern governments struggle with this. Economically, the empire was a powerhouse. Agriculture remained the empire's bread and butter, quite literally, with state-sponsored irrigation projects continuing to bolster productivity. But Bindusara also encouraged trade, attracting merchants like moths to a flame. He opened up trade routes, exchanging goods with distant lands from Mesopotamia to the Hellenistic world. The empire was practically a trade show, with spices, textiles, and precious gems swapping hands faster than you could say Mauryan monopoly. Speaking of the Hellenistic world, Bindusara's diplomatic ties with these kingdoms were as awkward as a first date, where both parties try to impress each other without seeming too eager. Picture this. On one side, you have the Mauryan Empire with its rich culture and resources. On the other, the Greek states with their philosophies and military prowess. The two sides were like high school rivals forced to work on a group project. Notably, Bindusara exchanged envoys with Antiochus, I of the Seleucid Empire, and while the details are sketchy, these exchanges were crucial in maintaining peace. No small feat considering the Greeks had a penchant for drama that would make reality TV look tame. Now, let's bust a few myths. Bindusara is often overshadowed by his father and his son, Ashoka, the latter of whom would become a byword for benevolent rule. Yet, Bindusara's reign was a masterclass in maintaining what his father had built. He wasn't out there expanding boundaries or waging grand wars. Rather, he was the empire's caretaker, ensuring the gears kept turning. It's easy to dismiss him as a placeholder, but maintaining stability in a vast empire was no small achievement. In a world where empires often crumbled under their own weight, Bindusara's ability to keep things together was nothing short of miraculous. Let's not sugarcoat it, though. Bindusara's reign, while largely peaceful, wasn't a utopian dream. The empire needed a firm grip to maintain order, and the administration was more big brother than benevolent guardian. Spies and informants were everywhere, ensuring loyalty and quashing dissent. This web of espionage was as intricate as it was effective, making the empire as secure as a fortress. It's a classic case of trust but verify, although in Bindusara's case, it was more like verify than trust. Despite his success, Bindusara's reign wasn't without its challenges. He faced revolts in the southern provinces, a testament to the empire's vastness and the difficulty of maintaining control over such a large area. But these uprisings were quashed with a deft combination of diplomacy and military might, further demonstrating Bindusara's ability to balance the carrot and the stick. Bindusara's story is a reminder that not every ruler needs to be a conqueror to leave a mark. Sometimes, the real heroes are the ones who keep the ship steady amid turbulent seas. His reign laid the groundwork for the future glories of the Mauryan Empire, and while he might not have been the flashy ruler that history loves to lionize, his steady hand ensured that the empire continued to thrive. Bindusara passed away around 272 BCE, leaving a well-oiled machine for his son Ashoka to inherit. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The story of the Mauryan Empire is far from over, and with Ashoka waiting in the wings, it's about to take a dramatic turn. So, stick around, because the next chapter in this epic saga promises to be as thrilling as a cliffhanger in your favorite series. The Mauryan Empire, under Bindusara, was a testament to the power of stability and the art of governance, proving that sometimes the best way to make history is to ensure it doesn't repeat itself. And so, with Bindusara's steady hands guiding the Mauryan ship through calm seas, the stage was set for Ashoka, the star of our historical drama, to take the spotlight. This was around 268 BCE, and Ashoka was ready to make his entrance like a rock star at a sold-out concert. But don't be fooled by the glamour of the spotlight. Ashoka's journey was anything but a smooth ride on a golden chariot. It was more like a roller coaster with unexpected drops and sharp turns. Right out of the gate, Ashoka was all about that conquest life. He was a chip off the old Mauryan block, eager to expand the empire's boundaries like a kid eyeing the last piece of candy. And what better target than Kalinga? Located in present-day Odisha, Kalinga was a prosperous kingdom with a stubborn streak that refused to bow to Mauryan rule. Ashoka saw Kalinga as both a challenge and a prize, a chance to flex his military muscles and add a shiny new jewel to the imperial crown. In 261 BCE, Ashoka launched his campaign against Kalinga, and it wasn't just another battle. It was an epic showdown, a clash of titans with stakes as high as an elephant's eye. The Kalinga War was brutal, with casualties soaring into the hundreds of thousands. Historical records peg the number of dead at over 100,000, with countless more wounded or displaced. This was a war that made the Mauryan armies might abundantly clear, but it also left a scar deeper than any sword wound. Now, here's where the story takes a surprising twist worthy of a Netflix special. Ashoka, standing on the blood-soaked fields of Kalinga, had what can only be described as an existential meltdown. Imagine the proud conqueror suddenly staring into the abyss of his actions. The devastation, the suffering, it was enough to make even a hardened ruler like Ashoka question his life's work. This was his crossroads, a pivotal moment that would redefine his reign and echo through the corridors of history. Enter Ashoka II, Zero, the Emperor of Empathy. After the Kalinga War, Ashoka experienced a profound transformation, the kind that makes for great redemption arcs. He embraced Buddhism, not just as a personal spiritual path, but as the guiding philosophy of his empire. This wasn't a casual decision. It was a seismic shift in policy and governance. Ashoka's conversion to Buddhism was the equivalent of a rock band switching from heavy metal to acoustic ballads, unexpected and revolutionary. Ashoka's newfound commitment to Buddhism led him to promote peace, tolerance, and welfare like a monk on a mission. He was determined to transform the Mauryan Empire from a war machine into a beacon of benevolence. And he didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. Ashoka embarked on a campaign of public works and social programs that would make any modern welfare state blush. He commissioned the construction of roads, hospitals, and rest houses, ensuring that travelers and traders could move freely and safely across the empire. But Ashoka's real stroke of genius was his propaganda machine, a masterclass in ancient public relations. He understood the power of communication, and he wielded it like a maestro conducting an orchestra. Ashoka's edicts, inscribed on rocks and pillars across the empire, were his megaphones, broadcasting his new policies and moral directives far and wide. These edicts weren't just royal decrees. They were carefully crafted messages designed to reshape public perception and mold societal values. In these inscriptions, Ashoka outlined his vision of Dhamma, a concept that blended Buddhist teachings with practical ethics. He advocated for non-violence, respect for all life forms, and harmony among people of different faiths and backgrounds. It was a radical departure from the usual emperor-speak of obey or else, and it resonated deeply with his subjects. Ashoka's edicts were the ancient equivalent of viral tweets, short, impactful, and designed to reach the masses. However, let's not get too starry-eyed here. Ashoka's turn to Buddhism and his emphasis on welfare didn't erase the harsh realities of empire. The Mauryan administration, with its vast bureaucracy and network of spies, remained as vigilant as ever. Ashoka might have traded his sword for a scroll, but he wasn't about to let the empire crumble under its own weight. He was a ruler who understood the importance of maintaining control, even as he preached compassion and peace. Ashoka's economic policies also underwent a transformation. While he continued to collect taxes to fund his welfare programs, he sought to balance economic growth with ethical governance. Trade flourished, aided by the empire's robust infrastructure, and Ashoka's support of Buddhist monasteries helped cement their role as centers of learning and culture. This economic stability was crucial for supporting his ambitious social initiatives. Yet, despite his best intentions, Ashoka's reign wasn't without its critics. Some accused him of neglecting the military, prioritizing ideology over security. Others questioned the sincerity of his conversion, viewing it as a political maneuver rather than a genuine spiritual awakening. But regardless of the skeptics, Ashoka's impact was undeniable. His policies laid the foundation for a more interconnected and culturally enriched society, one that embraced diversity and dialogue. As we delve deeper into Ashoka's legacy, it's clear that his story is one of contrasts, a ruler who straddled the line between conqueror and peacemaker, warrior and sage. His reign was a testament to the complexities of leadership and the power of transformation. And while his journey was far from perfect, it was a bold experiment in the art of ruling with heart and mind in harmony. The story of Ashoka doesn't end here, of course. His legacy would continue to shape the Mauryan Empire and influence future generations. But for now, let's leave Ashoka standing tall, a symbol of redemption and resilience, as we prepare to explore the next chapter in the epic saga of the Mauryas. Stay tuned, because the story is far from over, and history has a few more surprises up its sleeve. As Ashoka's reign waned, a new chapter began for the Mauryan Empire, one that didn't exactly sparkle with the same grandeur. You see, Ashoka's transformation into the Emperor of Peace didn't magically fix the empire's underlying cracks. Rather, it papered over them with a layer of Buddhist idealism. As the once fierce conqueror turned pacifist, he inadvertently left his successors a throne that was less of a seat of power and more of a hot potato. Following Ashoka's death in 232 BCE, the Mauryan Empire faced a classic case of succession blues, a tale as old as monarchy itself. His descendants, like many heirs to powerful legacies, had a knack for infighting that would make a soap opera look tame. The empire, once a well-oiled machine, started sputtering like an old engine in desperate need of a tune-up. Ashoka's immediate successor, Dasaratha, tried to keep the Buddhist flame alive, but he lacked the charisma and political savvy of his grandfather. This was a time when being a good Buddhist wasn't enough. You also needed to be a shrewd ruler. The Mauryan Empire, which at its zenith spanned over 5 million square kilometers, was now too vast for any single ruler without Ashoka's combination of authority and moral vision. The empire began to fragment, a process accelerated by internal strife and succession disputes. Imagine a game of musical chairs, but with thrones and power struggles instead of catchy tunes. The regional governors, or Mahamadiyas, who once diligently kept the empire's provinces in check, saw an opportunity to flex their muscles. They started acting more like independent rulers than loyal vassals, a move as subtle as a slap in the face. Economically, the empire was feeling the strain too. Without Ashoka's steady hand at the helm, the economic policies that supported his grand welfare projects began to unravel. Tax revenues dwindled, trade routes that once buzzed with activity slowed to a crawl, and the state-sponsored infrastructure projects that had kept the empire ticking ground to a halt. The Mauryan economy was like an intricate tapestry, and as the threads began to fray, the whole thing risked coming apart at the seams. Adding to the chaos, the empire faced external threats as well. The Greco-Bactrian kingdoms to the northwest, smelling blood in the water, started nibbling away at Mauryan territories like a hungry shark. These invasions were less about grand armies and more about a steady erosion of control. The Mauryan military, which had once been the pride of the empire, was now struggling to hold the line. With resources stretched thin and morale sinking faster than a stone in the Ganges, the once mighty army was a shadow of its former self. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't just a story of external invasions and economic downturns. The real drama was unfolding at home, where succession disputes and internal power struggles were tearing the empire apart from within. The Mauryan rulers who followed Ashoka were a mixed bag of mediocrity and mismanagement. Some tried to cling to the Buddhist ideals of their predecessor, while others sought to return to the militaristic policies of old. The result was a schizophrenic empire that couldn't decide if it wanted to be a bastion of peace or a fortress of power. By the time Brihadratha, the last Mauryan emperor, took the throne, the empire was on life support. His reign, which ended in 185 BCE, was marked by a feeble attempt to hold the crumbling pieces together. In a dramatic twist worthy of a Shakespearean tragedy, Brihadratha was assassinated by his own commander-in-chief, Pushyamitra Shunga, during a military parade. Talk about a hostile takeover. With Brihadratha's death, the curtain fell on the Mauryan Empire, and the Shunga dynasty rose from its ashes. So, what's the takeaway from this epic saga? The Mauryan Empire's decline is a classic tale of overextension and mismanagement, a cautionary fable for any would-be empire builders. But amid the chaos and collapse, the Mauryan legacy endured. Their rock edicts, scattered across the Indian landscape, continued to whisper Ashoka's messages of Dhamma long after the empire itself had faded. These edicts, etched in stone, became eternal reminders of a time when an emperor dared to trade his sword for a scroll. Moreover, Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism and his efforts to spread its teachings across Asia left an indelible mark. Buddhism, which had been a relatively minor sect, blossomed into a major world religion, carried along the trade routes that Ashoka had once nurtured. In places like Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, and beyond, the Mauryan legacy was a catalyst for cultural exchange and spiritual growth. The Mauryan Empire also set the stage for future Indian empires, laying the foundational concepts of centralized administration and economic policies that would be refined and adapted by later dynasties. In a way, the Mauryans were the original architects of what it meant to rule a subcontinent-sized empire. Their story, a blend of ambition, vision, and cautionary tales, remains a compelling narrative of human endeavor and the eternal dance between power and principle. So, as we close the book on the Mauryan Empire, let's not forget the lessons it offers. It was an empire built on the dreams of men like Chandragupta and Ashoka, who dared to think big and act even bigger. Yet, it was also an empire that succumbed to the age-old pitfalls of internal discord and external pressures. In the end, the Mauryan saga is a reminder that while empires rise and fall, the ideas and innovations they leave behind can echo through the ages, shaping the future in ways their founders could scarcely have imagined. And there you have it, folks. The rise and fall of the Mauryas, a story as grand and complex as the empire itself. Whether you're a fan of ancient history or just here for the drama, I hope you've enjoyed this journey through India's first dynasty. Until next time, keep questioning those romantic narratives and remember, history is never as simple as it seems. In the early 16th century, a young man named Suleiman was preparing to take the stage of one of the most epic dramas in world history. Born in 1494 in the Anatolian town of Trabzon, Suleiman was the son of Sultan Selim I, a guy who, let's just say, wouldn't win Father of the Year. Selim's parenting style was less warm and fuzzy and more axe and execution, as he was known for his ruthless purge of potential rivals, even family members. With this sort of role model, it's no wonder Suleiman grew up into a ruler who would be both admired and feared. Suleiman ascended to the throne of the Ottoman Empire in 1520 at the age of 26. Now, back in those days, taking over an empire wasn't like inheriting a family business. It was more akin to stepping onto a battlefield with more knives pointed at your back than a porcupine has quills. Yet Suleiman, with a charm and intellect that could rival any Renaissance man, stepped up to the plate and hit a home run. He wasn't just your average ruler. He was a polymath who loved poetry, philosophy, and science. But he was also a savvy politician and military strategist. One of Suleiman's first orders of business was to expand the empire's borders, because what ruler worth their salt doesn't want more land? His campaigns stretched the empire's reach into Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. By 1526, he had added significant chunks of Hungary to his empire after the decisive Battle of Mohács. Picture this. The Hungarian forces, led by King Louis Roman II, were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Louis himself reportedly drowned in a stream while trying to flee, which, let's be honest, is a tragic yet slightly ironic end for a king who probably thought he'd be remembered for more heroic exploits. Suleiman's campaigns didn't stop there. He was like the Energizer Bunny of conquest, just with fewer batteries and more cannons. By the time he was done, the Ottoman Empire sprawled over 3 continents. But expansion wasn't just about getting more territory. It was also about sending a message. And that message was clear. Suleiman wasn't just any sultan. He was the Sultan with a capital S. Now, let's talk about Istanbul, the glittering jewel in Suleiman's crown. Known as Constantinople before the Ottomans took over, it was already a pretty impressive city, but Suleiman wanted to make it the envy of the world. He had a passion for architecture that would make any modern-day real estate developer drool. He commissioned the construction of some of the most magnificent structures the world had ever seen, including the iconic Suleimani Mosque. Completed in 1558, it was designed by the legendary architect Mimar Sinan, who was basically the Ottoman equivalent of Michelangelo, just with more minarets and fewer Sistine chapels. Suleiman's architectural endeavors weren't just about aesthetics. they were also political statements. These grand structures weren't just places of worship. They were symbols of his empire's power and his own larger-than-life legacy. The Suleimani Mask, in particular, is a testament to this. It's said that the mask was designed to reflect the grandeur of the empire, incorporating both traditional Islamic and Byzantine architectural elements, symbolizing the merging of cultures under Ottoman rule. But was Suleiman truly magnificent, or is that just what his PR team wanted us to think? The truth is, while he was undoubtedly a man of great vision and accomplishment, he also had his fair share of less-than-magnificent moments. His reign was marked by numerous military campaigns that, while expanding the empire, also drained its coffers and cost countless lives. And then there was the whole issue of succession. In his later years, Suleiman's family drama could rival any soap opera, as he executed his own son, Mustafa, over fears of a coup, only to be devastated by the loss. Suleiman's life and reign were a complex tapestry of ambition, achievement, and tragedy. While the legends paint him as a nearly mythical figure, the reality was far more nuanced. He built an empire that was a melting pot of cultures, a powerhouse of military might, and a beacon of architectural brilliance. Yet, beneath the veneer of magnificence lay a ruler grappling with the same human flaws and dilemmas that have plagued leaders throughout history. As the night falls and the tales of Suleiman's exploits drift into the realm of dreams, one can't help but wonder about the paradox of power, how it can both build and destroy, elevate and corrupt. In the end, Suleiman the Magnificent remains a figure as complex as the empire he ruled, a testament to the heights and depths of human ambition. As we delve deeper into the chronicles of Suleiman the Magnificent, we find that his political acumen was as sharp as the swords of his janissaries. Let's start with his unlikely bromance with the French King Francis I. Yup, you heard that right. An Ottoman sultan and a French king, two dudes who on paper should have been at each other's throats, decided to join forces. Why? Because nothing unites like a common enemy, and for these two, it was the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V. Picture this. Two rulers, each with their own beef with Charlie, teaming up not in a buddy cop movie, but in the high-stakes game of 16th century geopolitics. Suleiman and Francis I's alliance, formalized in 1536, was like the early modern version of a strategic partnership. It was a move that left Europe scratching its collective head. This friendship wasn't just about military alliances, it was also economic. The Franco-Ottoman alliance included trade agreements that opened up the Mediterranean for French merchants, who suddenly found themselves with a VIP pass to the Ottoman markets. For Suleiman, it meant more cash flowing into his coffers, which, let's be honest, was always a good thing when you're running an empire. Speaking of coffers, let's chat about the economic wizardry of Suleiman's reign. The Ottoman economy under Suleiman was like a well-oiled machine, or rather, an intricately woven carpet. The empire's wealth was built on a foundation of agriculture, trade, and of course, taxes. Ah, taxes. Not exactly the stuff of legendary tales, but crucial nonetheless. The Ottomans were meticulous in their tax collection, ensuring that every village and town contributed to the grand tapestry of the empire's economy. From the grains of Anatolia to the spices of the Arab lands, the flow of goods was regulated with the precision of a Swiss watch, only with more pomegranates and fewer cuckoo clocks. But running an empire wasn't all silk and spices. There were the less glamorous realities, like managing unruly provinces and dealing with the occasional rebellious governor who fancied himself a local hero. Picture Suleiman's administrators as the ultimate multitaskers, juggling diplomacy, military might, and bureaucratic finesse. They were like the original plate spinners, just with more camels and fewer circus tents. And let's not forget the janissaries, the elite Ottoman infantry. These guys were the muscle behind the empire, ensuring that any whispers of dissent were swiftly silenced. But even they weren't immune to the occasional bout of discontent, usually over pay or privileges. Because, surprise, even in the 16th century, money talked. Now, while Suleiman was busy playing chess with the political heavyweights of Europe and ensuring his empire's economy didn't collapse like a house of cards, he was also laying the groundwork for what we might call Ottoman globalization. The empire was a melting pot of cultures, languages, and religions, and Suleiman knew how to play this to his advantage. He was like a master chef, blending the diverse ingredients of his realm into a recipe for imperial success. The Ottomans were known for their religious tolerance, which, in a world rife with sectarian conflict, was as rare as finding a unicorn. This policy wasn't just about being nice. It was smart governance. By allowing various religious communities to govern themselves under the millet system, Suleiman ensured a degree of stability and loyalty that was essential for an empire as vast as his. But let's not romanticize things too much. The reality was that these communities still paid taxes to the Sultan, and the Ottoman bureaucracy was as Byzantine as it was efficient, pun intended. There were layers upon layers of administration, and if you think navigating modern-day government paperwork is a headache, try dealing with the Ottoman tax system. Yet somehow it worked. The empire thrived, its cities bustling with merchants, scholars, and artisans, each contributing to the kaleidoscope of Ottoman society. Suleiman's reign, however, wasn't all sunshine and roses. As he expanded his empire, the cost of maintaining it began to weigh heavily. The military campaigns, while glorious, were expensive. Picture a giant, never-ending game of Risk, but with real soldiers and real stakes. The need for constant military readiness meant that Suleiman's treasury was often stretched thinner than a strand of Turkish delight. And let's not forget the human cost. The soldiers who marched into battle, the civilians caught in the crossfire of conquest. These were the harsh realities behind the glittering facade of Ottoman splendor. In the end, Suleiman's story is one of contrast. He was a sultan who could pen a love poem as easily as he could order a military campaign. A ruler who built alliances across continents while navigating the intricate web of his own empire. As we continue to explore his legacy, remember that behind every grand tale of conquest and glory lies a tapestry of human experience, both magnificent and mundane. Suleiman's story is like a grand opera, full of soaring highs and dramatic lows, and nowhere is this more evident than in his military campaigns. Let's start with the Siege of Vienna in 1529, a defining moment in his reign and a classic tale of ambition meeting reality head-on. Suleiman, armed with an army reportedly numbering 120,000 and enough artillery to make your ears ring just thinking about it, set his sights on the heart of Europe. Vienna wasn't just any city. It was the gateway to Western Europe, and taking it would have been like planting the Ottoman flag right in the backyard of Christendom. Now, one might think that moving such a massive force across Europe was a straightforward affair. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Imagine the logistical nightmare of supplying food, water, and shelter for that many people, not to mention the horses, camels, and donkeys needed to haul the cannons and supplies. It was like organizing a medieval music festival, but with more swords and less music. The army faced everything from mud-soaked roads to treacherous mountain passes, and by the time they reached Vienna, the autumn rains had turned the ground into a swampy mess. The city, well fortified and garrisoned by a determined force, held out against the siege. After a month of assaults and counter-assaults, Suleiman was forced to withdraw, leaving behind a trail of destruction, but failing to capture the city. This wasn't exactly a victory lap for the Ottomans, but it was a testament to Suleiman's ambition. And while the romantic version of history paints this as a clash of civilizations, the reality was more about the limits of military logistics and the unpredictable nature of European weather. It's a reminder that in the grand game of empires, Mother Nature always has a seat at the table. But Suleiman didn't earn his reputation as the lawgiver by resting on his laurels. If land campaigns had their limitations, the sea offered new opportunities. Enter the Mediterranean, which Suleiman sought to transform into his empire's personal pond. He teamed up with the legendary pirate-turned-admiral, Hayreddin Barbarossa. This guy wasn't just any sailor. He was the rock star of the waves, with a fleet that could give Poseidon a run for his money. Together, they set about establishing Ottoman dominance in the Mediterranean through a series of naval campaigns that saw them capturing key ports and islands, much to the chagrin of the Habsburgs and their allies. One such campaign was the Battle of Preveza in 1538, where Barbarossa's fleet decisively defeated a much larger Christian coalition led by the Genoese admiral Andrea Doria. Think of it as the naval equivalent of David versus Goliath, but with cannons and galleys instead of slingshots. This victory not only secured Ottoman control over the eastern Mediterranean, but also reinforced Suleiman's status as a maritime power. And speaking of naval logistics, it's worth noting that coordinating a fleet was no walk in the park. Ships in the 16th century were more than just floating fortresses. They were like mobile bazaars, complete with sailors, soldiers, and merchants all squished together like sardines in a can. The logistics of supplying such a fleet with food, water, and ammunition, while maintaining morale, was akin to herding a particularly unruly group of cats. Yet, under Suleiman's command, the Ottoman fleet became a force to be reckoned with, turning the Mediterranean into a bustling Ottoman highway. But Suleiman's success wasn't just due to brute force. He was also a master of diplomacy, deftly playing his enemies against each other like a seasoned chess player. One of his most cunning moves involved leveraging the tensions between the Catholic Habsburgs and the Protestant states of Europe. By supporting Protestant princes in the Holy Roman Empire, he managed to keep the Habsburgs off balance, a tactic that allowed him to expand his influence without having to fire a single cannonball. It's a classic case of divide and conquer, and Suleiman played it like a pro. Yet, for all his military and diplomatic prowess, Suleiman's campaigns weren't without their absurdities. Take, for example, the time his army marched through the Carpathian Mountains in 1532 to outflank the Habsburg forces. The mountainous terrain was so treacherous that the Ottomans had to disassemble their cannons and carry them piece by piece over the rugged landscape. Imagine the scene. Thousands of soldiers, all grumbling and cursing, lugging cannon pieces up and down mountains like some bizarre medieval workout video. These are the kinds of things you don't see in the romanticized paintings of Suleiman's conquests. And let's not overlook the economic impact of these campaigns. While they brought glory and territory to the empire, they also drained its resources. The cost of maintaining a standing army and navy was astronomical, and the financial burden often fell on the shoulders of the empire's citizens. Taxes were raised, and the constant demand for soldiers meant that many families saw their sons conscripted into the military. The empire's economy, while robust, was perpetually under pressure, a fact that Suleiman had to balance alongside his imperial ambitions. In the end, Suleiman's military campaigns were as much about power projection as they were about practical realities. They demonstrated his ability to adapt and innovate, to use both force and diplomacy to achieve his goals. But they also highlighted the challenges of empire building, from the logistical hurdles of moving armies across continents to the economic strains of sustaining such a vast realm. Suleiman's story is a reminder that behind every grand conquest lies a tapestry of human effort and endurance, a blend of glory and hardship that defined his reign. As we leave this chapter of Suleiman's military exploits, we see a ruler who was as much a product of his time as he was a shaper of it. His campaigns were a testament to his vision and determination, but they also reflected the complex interplay of politics, economics, and human nature that characterized the world of the 16th century. Stay tuned, because Suleiman's story is far from over, and the next acts promise even more intrigue and drama. And while Suleiman's military campaigns were making waves across continents, back at home, his personal life was stirring up a tempest of its own. Enter Roxolana, also known as Hurrem Sultan, the woman who went from being a slave to the Sultan's most trusted confidante and eventual wife. Her story is the stuff of legends, or perhaps soap operas, because nothing says palace intrigue quite like the rise of a concubine to the pinnacle of Ottoman power. Roxolana, originally named Alexandra Lisowska, was of Ukrainian origin and was captured by Crimean Tatars before being sold into the Sultan's harem. The harem, mind you, was not just a place of leisure, but a political arena where alliances were forged and broken faster than you can say Ottoman hospitality. Roxolana's charm and wit quickly caught Suleiman's eye, and she became his favorite, a position that came with both perks and pitfalls. Suleiman broke with tradition by marrying her, an unprecedented move for an Ottoman sultan. This was about as scandalous as a royal wedding could get in the 16th century, throwing the court into a tizzy and sending the rumor mill into overdrive. Their marriage wasn't just a romantic tale, it was a game-changer in Ottoman politics. Roxolana wielded significant influence, advising Suleiman on matters of state, and even corresponding with foreign leaders. She was like the original power behind the throne, the Lady Macbeth of the Ottoman court, just with fewer daggers and more diplomacy. Her influence extended to her sons, who were in line for the throne, and this is where the plot thickens. Palace intrigue, check. Family drama, double check. The Ottoman court at the time was like a Shakespearean theatre, minus the soliloquies, but with plenty of real-life drama. Roxolana's rise upset the established order, leading to rivalries and betrayals that would make Game of Thrones look like a children's bedtime story. One of the most notable casualties of this power struggle was Suleiman's eldest son, Mustafa. Highly popular and seen as a competent leader, Mustafa was tragically executed on charges of conspiracy, a decision in which Roxolana's influence is often debated. This brings us to the myth-busting part. Was Roxolana the scheming mastermind behind her stepson's downfall? The sources are murkier than the Bosphorus at sunrise. While some historians paint her as a Machiavellian figure pulling the strings from behind the curtains, others argue that such narratives are exaggerated, fueled by sexism and the vilification of powerful women. Truth is, the court was a cauldron of ambition and paranoia, where even the slightest hint of disloyalty could be a death sentence. But let's shift gears from the palace corridors to Suleiman's more genteel pursuits. The Sultan wasn't just a warrior king. He was a patron of the arts, a poet, and an amateur jeweler. Yes, you heard that right. Suleiman had a penchant for crafting jewelry, proving that even the most formidable rulers needed a creative outlet. Picture him meticulously setting gemstones into a piece of jewelry, perhaps as a gift for Roxolana, while half the world was plotting either to join or overthrow his empire. Under Suleiman's reign, the Ottoman Empire experienced a cultural renaissance. His court was a magnet for artists, poets, and scholars from across the Islamic world and beyond. The Sultan himself was a published poet, writing under the pen name Muhibi, which means the lover. His poetry, much like his reign, was a blend of romanticism and realism, offering insights into his complex character. One of his poems reads, "In this world a spell of luck is borrowed, the rest is just a dream that cannot be followed." A poignant reminder that even the mighty Sultan grappled with the impermanence of power. The empire's flourishing cultural scene was epitomized by the works of architect Mimar Sinan, who, as we previously mentioned, was the Michelangelo of the Ottoman world. Sinan's masterpieces, including the Suleimani Mosque, are still standing today, testaments to the era's architectural prowess and the Sultan's vision. But let's not forget the other unsung heroes of the time, the artisans and craftsmen whose intricate work adorned everything from mosque ceilings to palace walls. They were the silent architects of Suleiman's legacy, each tile and tapestry a reflection of the empire's artistic zenith. Despite these grand achievements, life in the Ottoman court wasn't all poetry and palaces. The bureaucratic machinery was as complex as a Rube Goldberg machine, with officials known for their creative interpretations of Suleiman's laws. His legal reforms earned him the title Kanuni, or lawgiver. Yet the reality was often far messier. Implementing these laws across a sprawling empire involved a level of administrative gymnastics that might make even a Cirque du Soleil performer dizzy. The Sultan's legal code was an ambitious attempt to harmonize the empire's diverse legal traditions, blending Islamic Sharia with customary practices. But here's where we bust another myth. It wasn't all Suleiman's doing. He had a cadre of advisors and legal scholars who helped draft these laws, translating the Sultan's vision into practical governance. Yet the challenge lay in the implementation. Imagine trying to enforce a uniform legal system across territories as varied as Egypt, Greece, and Yemen, each with its own traditions and expectations. It was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, just with more turbans and fewer PowerPoints. Now, let's not romanticize this legal system as some sort of utopian ideal. While it brought a degree of order and justice, it also had its dark sides. Punishments could be severe, and the legal system was often skewed in favor of the wealthy and powerful. Plus, there was always the looming specter of corruption, a timeless companion to any government endeavor. As we wade deeper into the murky waters of Suleiman's personal life and court intrigues, one thing becomes crystal clear. The Sultan navigated a world that was as much about personal relationships as it was about politics and power. In an empire where trust was a currency as valuable as gold, betrayal was never far from the horizon. The The court was a microcosm of the empire itself, a place where alliances were as fragile as the porcelain vases that adorned its halls. And so, as we leave this chapter of Suleiman's story, we're left contemplating the paradox of his reign, a period of cultural flourishing and legal reform set against a backdrop of personal tragedy and political machination. Suleiman the Magnificent was indeed a man of complexities, his rule a tapestry woven with threads of ambition, love, betrayal, and art. As we prepare to explore the final chapters of his life, remember that the Sultan's legacy is not just in the monuments and laws he left behind, but in the intricate dance of human ambition and fallibility that defined his era. Stay tuned, because the story of Suleiman is far from over, and the final acts promise revelations as grand as any imperial court. Suleiman, the Magnificent's legacy, is akin to the shimmering facade of a grand palace, dazzling from afar yet revealing cracks upon closer inspection. His reign, from 1520 until his death in 1566, was a period of profound transformation for the Ottoman Empire. At its zenith, the empire stretched over 2 million square kilometers, from Budapest to Baghdad and Algiers to Mecca. But the true measure of his impact is less about the borders on a map and more about the indelible mark he left on history. Under Suleiman, the Ottoman Empire was not just a political juggernaut, but an economic powerhouse. Picture a bustling marketplace, with spices wafting through the air, fabrics as vibrant as a peacock's tail, and the clinking of coins as traders haggled over prices. The empire's economy was a mosaic of trade routes, agriculture, and industry, all meticulously managed by a bureaucracy that made today's red tape look like a piece of cake. Even so, the empire's wealth was not a bottomless pit. The cost of endless military campaigns, like the failed siege of Vienna, stretched the finances thin. Imagine spending on military exploits equivalent to hundreds of millions today, while trying to keep the empire's diverse population content and loyal. Yet, Suleiman's legacy is not just about the tangible. The myths surrounding him are as much a part of his story as the facts. He's often remembered as a larger-than-life figure, the lawgiver who brought justice to his realm. But let's be honest, his legal reforms were less about noble ideals and more about practical governance. They were necessary to maintain order in a sprawling empire that was as culturally varied as a patchwork quilt. Suleiman's laws streamlined the empire's judicial process, but they also reinforced his authority, ensuring that the Sultan's word was as unyielding as granite. The romanticized view of Suleiman as the benevolent ruler, the Magnificent, often glosses over the darker aspects of his reign. His decision to execute his beloved son Mustafa was a calculated act driven by the fear of rebellion. This wasn't just palace intrigue, it was a harsh reminder of the brutal realities of power. In the Ottoman world, where succession crises could lead to civil war, the execution was a preemptive strike, albeit one that left Suleiman personally shattered. Roxolana, too, is a figure shrouded in both allure and controversy. Her rise from concubinage to power is a story that captivates the imagination, yet it's also emblematic of the cutthroat nature of Ottoman politics. While she is often cast as the puppet master behind the curtain, the reality is that her influence was a reflection of Suleiman's trust and the complex gender dynamics of the harem. Her story is a reminder that power in the Ottoman court was less about titles and more about access and proximity to the Sultan. As the curtain falls on Suleiman's life, he leaves behind an empire at the height of its cultural and political power, but also one facing significant challenges. The seeds of future troubles were sown during his reign: economic pressures, military overreach, and the delicate balance of power within the court. The empire he left was a giant, magnificent yet vulnerable, a fact that would become apparent in the years following his death. History, however, is a selective storyteller. It remembers Suleiman as the majestic ruler who expanded the Ottoman Empire and endowed it with architectural marvels. The Suleimani Mosque still stands as a testament to his vision, a fusion of grandeur and spirituality that continues to draw visitors from around the globe. Yet, history also weaves the narrative of his failures and personal tragedies into the tapestry, offering lessons on the ephemeral nature of power. In the grand scheme of things, Suleiman's legacy is a paradox, a blend of brilliance and brutality, vision and vanity. He was a ruler who could pen a love sonnet as easily as he could sign a death warrant. His story is a cautionary tale about the complexities of leadership and the burdens of empire. As we look back on his reign, we are reminded that history is not just a collection of dates and deeds, but a reflection of human nature, with all its contradictions and complexities. Suleiman, the Magnificent, remains a towering figure in the annals of history, a sultan whose legacy is both celebrated and critiqued. His life was a testament to the heights and pitfalls of human ambition, a reminder that behind every legendary figure lies a mortal grappling with the same doubts and dilemmas that have defined humanity across the ages. As we close the chapter on his story, we do so with the understanding that the past is not merely a distant land, but a mirror that reflects the enduring saga of power and its consequences. In the ancient land between the Tigris and Euphrates, a place we now call Mesopotamia, things were buzzing more than a modern-day Twitter feed. This was the cradle of civilization, folks, where humankind first decided that living in cities was a good idea, despite the occasional flood or famine. Think of it as the original urban experiment, complete with all the drama and intrigue you'd expect from a society that invented both writing and bureaucracy. Now, let's talk architecture, because Mesopotamians weren't just scraping by, they were scraping the skies. The ziggurat, those massive terraced structures, were the OG skyscrapers. These were the architectural love children of pyramids and temples, towering over the cities like ancient VIP lounges for the gods. The great ziggurat of Ur, for instance, was a staggering 210 feet long, 150 feet wide, and 100 feet high. That's like stacking 3 basketball courts on top of each other, and then daring the guards to say it wasn't impressive. But the ziggurats weren't just religious showpieces. They were also a testament to human organization. Imagine coordinating thousands of workers, all without the help of project management software or even a decent cup of coffee. Yet, somehow, those enterprising Mesopotamians pulled it off. These structures stood as monuments to the sheer willpower of a civilization that had mastered brickmaking to a fine art, turning mud into marvels. And speaking of mud, let's not forget about cuneiform tablets, the ancient equivalent of those viral tweets that everyone thinks they can write, but very few can. These little clay tablets were the powerhouse of Mesopotamian communication. With a stylus and some wet clay, scribes documented everything from grain inventories to epic poetry. Forget emojis. These guys were using wedge-shaped marks to express everything from love to litigation. It's from these cuneiform tablets that we get one of the most remarkable pieces of literature in human history, the Epic of Gilgamesh. This epic tale was etched into 12 tablets long before Homer even thought about writing the Iliad. It's arguably the world's first great story, featuring themes of friendship, adventure, and mortality that still resonate today. In a way, it's the literary ancestor of every blockbuster movie with a hero's journey, minus the billion-dollar CGI budget. At the heart of this epic is Gilgamesh himself, a king with more ego than an Instagram influencer with 1 million followers and the abs to match. Gilgamesh ruled the city of Uruk, a place so bustling it would make New York look like a sleepy village. As a king, Gilgamesh wasn't exactly the people's champion. He was more like the guy who'd cut in line at Starbucks and then act surprised when everyone's annoyed. But hey, when you're 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, humility isn't exactly your strong suit. Gilgamesh's story is one of transformation, reckoning with the kind of existential questions that still keep people up at night. But before he got all introspective, he was a problem. His rule was so oppressive that his own people prayed to the gods for relief. In response, the gods sent Enkidu, a wild man created from clay, to challenge Gilgamesh. Think of Enkidu as the original best friend who calls you out on your nonsense, but with more hair and less social graces. What follows in the epic is a bromance for the ages, filled with adventures that would make Indiana Jones take notes. Together, Gilgamesh and Enkidu slay monsters, defy gods, and ultimately confront the inevitability of death. It's a tale that explores human limitations and the quest for immortality, themes that resonate because they are as relevant today as they were over 4,000 years ago. So next time you're scrolling through social media wondering about the meaning of life, remember, you're not alone. Gilgamesh was pondering similar questions millennia ago, albeit without the distraction of cat memes. Mesopotamia might have been the cradle of civilization, but it was also the cradle of all our existential crises. And in the ziggurats and cuneiform tablets, they left us not just stories, but the blueprints for grappling with the big questions of life, one clay tablet at a time. And just like that, we shift from existential musings to a bromance that would make the fast and furious crew look like casual acquaintances. Enter Enkidu, the wild man who's less of a Tarzan and more of a Mesopotamian Grizzly Adams. Crafted by the gods themselves, Enkidu was designed to be Gilgamesh's equal, a counterbalance to that overinflated ego. He was the yin to Gilgamesh's yang, the earthy reality check to a king lost in his own hype. Raised among the animals, Enkidu was the original, off-the-grid guy. His introduction to human society came courtesy of Shamhat, a temple prostitute who used the oldest trick in the book, literally to civilize him. Over a span of 7 days, she introduced him to the finer things in life, companionship and bread. Now, let's unravel the socio-political tapestry of Mesopotamia, where city-states were the neighborhood gangs of the day, each with its own king who doubled as a local warlord. Uruk, Gilgamesh's stomping ground, was one such city-state, known for its formidable walls, because nothing says welcome like a good defense strategy. These walls weren't just a testament to Gilgamesh's power, but also to the constant threat of invasions. Mesopotamia was essentially a real-life game of risk, with each city-state vying for territory and resources, often at the expense of their neighbors. It was a dog-eat-dog world, folks, and Gilgamesh was top dog, or so he thought. The guards of Mesopotamia, meanwhile, were like meddlesome board members in the business of humanity. They had more drama than a reality TV show, constantly bickering and using humans as their pawns. With a pantheon that included Anu, Enlil, and Ishtar, these deities had a vested interest in the affairs of men, or at least in keeping those affairs interesting. When Gilgamesh's tyranny became too much for the people of Uruk to bear, they turned to the gods for help. Thus, Enkidu was born, not just as a challenger, but as a catalyst for change. And change he did bring. His initial clash with Gilgamesh was less clash of the titans, and more two bros go to the mat. Instead of ending in bloodshed, their fight concluded in mutual respect, a classic tale of rivals turned best friends. This is where the story morphs into a buddy adventure, with the duo embarking on exploits that would make Hercules consider a career change. Together, they set out to defeat the monstrous Humbaba in the cedar forest, a feat that was half heroism, half deforestation campaign. Their victory was a testament to their combined strength and highlighted the theme of friendship as a force that can conquer all obstacles, even the ones that scream and have claws. But let's not romanticize this too much. Behind the tales of heroism were practical considerations. The cedar forest was more than just a monster's lair. It was a resource-rich area that promised valuable timber. Gilgamesh's quest wasn't just about glory. It was also a calculated move in the economic chess game of Mesopotamian politics. Tapping into the forest wasn't just about defeating Humbaba. It was about expanding Uruk's influence and resources. Speaking of influence, let's address the elephant in the room, Gilgamesh's quest for fame. While our epic hero might have been preoccupied with immortalizing his name, there's a strong argument to be made that his adventures were more about PR than personal growth. In a world where oral storytelling was the media of the day, ensuring your deeds were sung far and wide was akin to trending on social media. Each victory, each adventure, was a carefully crafted narrative designed to bolster his legacy. It's here that we see the duality of Gilgamesh, a man caught between the divine and the mortal, between the heroic legends and the harsh realities. His story is one of power and glory, but also of the inevitable quest for immortality, a quest that would ultimately lead him to confront his own limitations. But that's a tale for another day. For now, we leave our heroes mid-adventure, on the cusp of further exploits that will test their friendship and their resolve. Just remember, folks, in Mesopotamia, as in life, the line between legend and reality is as thin as a cuneiform tablet. Stay tuned for more epic musings as our story unfolds, one clay tablet at a time. And so, with the dust of Uruk still clinging to their sandals, Gilgamesh and Enkidu set their sights on the cedar forest, a place as legendary as it was lucrative, with trees so mighty they could have been the envy of any lumberjack convention. This wasn't just some whimsical jaunt through the woods. It was a quest that would make any modern-day environmentalist gasp in horror. Picture it, two demigods armed with axes, ready to tackle a forest that was both a natural wonder and a divine stronghold. The stakes were higher than a ziggurat, and failure meant more than social disgrace. It meant divine retribution. Now, let's talk about this forest, because it wasn't your average patch of trees. The cedar forest was like the Amazon of the ancient world, a lush expanse guarded by Humbaba, a fearsome creature with a face that could launch 1,000 nightmares. This was no mere forest ranger. Humbaba was appointed by Enlil, the god of earth, wind, and air, who had a vested interest in preserving this arboreal treasure. And why wouldn't he? The forest was a cash cow of the ancient economy, a source of timber that was as valuable as oil is today. If you wanted to build a palace or a ziggurat that could rival the god's own digs, you needed cedar wood, and lots of it. As Gilgamesh and Enkidu marched towards their arboreal showdown, the economic implications were as significant as the mythic. You see, the Mesopotamians weren't just tree huggers gone rogue. They were savvy strategists who understood the power of resources. Timber wasn't just about building. It was about status, trade, and military might. Control of the cedar forest meant control of the region's wealth, and Gilgamesh had every intention of making Uruk the epicenter of economic power. In his mind, this was less about fighting a monster, and more about conducting a hostile takeover with a divine twist. But let's not get carried away with visions of grandeur without acknowledging the harsh realities. Deforestation, even in ancient times, came with consequences. The Mesopotamians had to balance their lust for resources with the wrath of the gods, who weren't exactly thrilled about their creations being turned into fashionable living room sets. The cedar forest was sacred, and its desecration could unleash divine fury that made natural disasters look like minor inconveniences. So while Gilgamesh and Enkidu might have been leading a heroic charge, they were also walking a tightrope of cosmic proportions. Now, if you're imagining this as a serene journey through nature's bounty, think again. Their trek was more like an episode of Survivor, complete with treacherous terrain, ferocious wildlife, and a host of spiritual roadblocks. Every step was a reminder that they were treading on hallowed ground, and the looming presence of Humbaba added a ticking clock to their expedition. It was a classic case of man versus nature, with a side of divine intervention just to keep things interesting. Speaking of interventions, let's not forget the gods' penchant for meddling in human affairs. They were like that overzealous director who just can't resist adding his own flair to the script. Anu and Lil and their celestial cohort kept a close eye on Gilgamesh's antics, ready to dish out divine justice if things got too out of hand. And let's be honest, Gilgamesh was basically writing checks his hubris couldn't cash. He might have been part divine, but he was all human when it came to ignoring the consequences of his actions. But what about Enkidu, the wild man with a heart as big as his biceps? He was the voice of reason, the conscience Gilgamesh sorely needed. Yet, even Enkidu couldn't resist the allure of adventure and glory. His transformation from beast to hero was a testament to the power of friendship and the human desire to push boundaries, even when those boundaries were guarded by monsters with a penchant for decapitation. Together, they formed a dynamic duo that was less Batman and Robin, more Thelma and Louise, but with a lot more testosterone and existential angst. Their encounter with Humbaba was the stuff of legends, a battle that combined brute force with divine intervention. Armed with weapons gifted by the gods, they faced the guardian of the forest in a showdown that would make any action movie director salivate. And while the fight was epic, the aftermath was even more telling. With Humbaba defeated, the duo had not only slain a monster, but also defied the gods, setting a precedent for hubris that would echo through the ages. So, what's the takeaway here? Well, Gilgamesh and Enkidu's exploits were as much about economic gain as they were about heroic glory. Their journey to the cedar forest was a strategic power play, a bid to solidify Uruk's dominance in a world where resources were as precious as divine favor. But in their quest for immortality and fame, they also highlighted the fragile balance between human ambition and the wrath of the gods, a balance as precarious now as it was thousands of years ago. And if you're wondering how Gilgamesh would fare in today's world, Let's just say he'd be perfect for a reality show. King of the wild. Deforestation and divine drama has a nice ring to it, don't you think? With his penchant for adventure and flair for the dramatic, Gilgamesh would be the star of any network, a character whose exploits would be as captivating today as they were in ancient Mesopotamia. But for now, we leave our heroes at the edge of the forest, axes in hand, ready to carve their names into history, one cedar tree at a time. Stay tuned, because the saga of Gilgamesh and Enkidu is far from over, and there are plenty more divine creatures and existential crises to tackle on the road ahead. With axes still clutched, and the echoes of their cedar conquest fading into the annals of mythic lore, our dynamic duo, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, found that their victory came with a hefty price tag. Because, in the grand theatre of life, nobody gets out alive, and it was Enkidu who received his grim reminder first. The guards, not ones to let a transgression slide without a little divine retribution, decided it was time for Enkidu to punch his ticket to the afterlife. Enkidu's demise wasn't a swift exit stage left. It was a slow, torturous decline that could give any modern-day soap opera a run for its melodramatic money. His illness was a celestial smackdown, a divine punishment for defying the gods' will. As Enkidu lay dying, Gilgamesh was forced to confront the chilling inevitability of mortality. It was a front-row seat to the kind of existential crisis that's been haunting humanity since we first realized we weren't immortal. Now, let's pause for a reality check. This story, while epic, has a grounding in the gritty realities of Mesopotamian life. The ancients didn't exactly have an optimistic view of the afterlife. Forget harps and clouds. They pictured a dreary underworld known as the House of Dust, where souls languished in a bleak, shadowy existence. It's the kind of place that makes a Monday morning commute seem positively heavenly by comparison. This grim outlook was reflected in their funerary practices, where the emphasis was on appeasing the gods to ensure, if not a happy afterlife, at least a less miserable one. Enkidu's deathbed reflections were a poignant reminder of the Mesopotamian belief in fate's unyielding grip. His fevered visions, as recorded on those trusty cuneiform tablets, spoke of the inevitability of death and the futility of human ambition when squared against divine will. It's an anxiety that echoes through the corridors of time, from ancient ziggurats to today's skyscrapers. Mortality, it seems, is the great equalizer, whether you're a king or a commoner, a demigod or a desk jockey. For Gilgamesh, Enkidu's death was a devastating blow, a harsh slap from reality's cold hand. His grief was as monumental as the walls of Uruk, leading him to question the very fabric of existence. If even mighty Enkidu could be laid low by the whims of the gods, what hope was there for mere mortals? Thus began Gilgamesh's frantic quest for immortality, a journey that was less about escaping death and more about defying its inevitability. In his desperation, Gilgamesh sought out Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian equivalent of Noah, who had survived a great flood and been granted eternal life by the gods. This wasn't just a quest. It was an odyssey filled with peril and introspection. Gilgamesh's travels took him across hostile terrains and treacherous waters. No GPS, no Google Maps, just raw determination and a burning desire to cheat death. Along the way, he encountered mystical figures and daunting challenges, each more symbolic than the last. Now, let's unpack the myth versus reality of Gilgamesh's quest. In the narrative, his journey is a fantastical adventure with serpents and celestial fairies. But strip away the mythic trappings, and what remains is a deeply human story of fear and ambition. Gilgamesh's struggle reflects our timeless battle against the ticking clock, a quest for meaning in a world that offers no guarantees. His pursuit of immortality was as much about leaving a legacy as it was about living forever. After all, if you can't escape death, you might as well make sure people remember you lived. Economically speaking, Gilgamesh had something of an ancient PR strategy. By embarking on this epic journey, he was ensuring his name would be sung by bards and immortalized in clay. It's the ultimate branding exercise, predating modern media by millennia. In a world where oral tradition was the primary means of storytelling, being remembered was akin to achieving eternal life. However, Gilgamesh's journey wasn't without its critiques, both then and now. Some scholars argue that his quest was less about personal growth and more about ego. It was a way to bolster his reputation, to ensure that his reign would be remembered long after the sands of time had buried the walls of Uruk. In this light, Gilgamesh's adventures become less a noble pursuit and more a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris. Yet, there's a reason why this story has endured for over 4,000 years. It taps into the universal human experience, the desire to find purpose and defy the inevitable. Gilgamesh's journey is a mirror, reflecting our own fears and aspirations, our quests for meaning in the face of mortality. It's both a mythic adventure and a stark reminder of our own limits. As Gilgamesh confronted the reality of death, the Mesopotamians were living in a world where life was fragile and often brutally short. Average life expectancy hovered around the mid-30s, with infant mortality rates that would make any modern statistician wince. In such a world, the quest for immortality wasn't just a king's folly. It was a collective yearning for something more, a hope that there might be something beyond the dust of the earth. So, as we leave Gilgamesh on the cusp of his greatest journey, we're reminded that his story is as much about the past as it is about the present. It's a narrative that continues to resonate because it speaks to the core of what it means to be human, to live, to love, and to confront the shadow of death with whatever courage we can muster. But don't worry, this isn't the end of the epic. There are still more lessons to be learned, more adventures to be had, and more myths to be unraveled in the saga of Gilgamesh. Stay tuned, because the king's journey isn't over yet, and there are still plenty of existential dragons to slay along the way. As Gilgamesh's epic journey reached its crescendo, he found himself staring into the abyss of his own mortality, only to discover that immortality wasn't in the cards. Utnapishtim, the ancient flood survivor, had gifted him a nugget of wisdom instead of eternal life. The secret to enduring was not through endless breath, but through unforgettable deeds. Our hero's return to Uruk was less a triumphant homecoming and more a philosophical pilgrimage, where he grasped a truth as old as the ziggurats themselves. Legacy, not life, is the real path to immortality. Now, let's peel back the layers of this saga and get to the juicy core. Gilgamesh's epiphany wasn't just the narrative turning point. It was a cultural mic drop that rippled through time. Why? Because it resonated with a universal truth. Humans, no matter how far removed by years or geography, are united in their desire to leave a mark. It's the reason we build monuments, pen epic tales, and post relentless streams of photos online, hoping for a slice of digital eternity. Back in Uruk, armed with his newfound clarity, Gilgamesh set about solidifying his legacy. The city's towering walls, which he had initially constructed as a testament to his might, now stood as his enduring contribution to civilization. These walls, spanning a jaw-dropping 6 miles and enclosing an area large enough to house tens of thousands, became the physical embodiment of his quest for eternal remembrance. It's as if he realized that while he couldn't cheat death, he could certainly leave behind something that would outlast the inevitable decay of flesh. The story of Gilgamesh, etched into 12 clay tablets, was not just a tale for the Mesopotamian masses. It was a narrative blueprint that would influence countless generations of storytellers. From the poetic epics of Homer to the modern-day superhero sagas, the fingerprints of Gilgamesh's journey are everywhere. Those tablets were the original viral content, spreading through ancient cultures like a captivating meme that never lost its relevance. Think about it. The themes of ambition, the pursuit of meaning, and the celebration of friendship are as relatable today as they were in the age of cuneiform. It's no accident that the Epic of Gilgamesh has been translated into myriad languages, making its way into the hands of scholars, poets, and anyone with an existential itch to scratch. The story's endurance is a testament to its ability to speak to the human condition, a condition that, despite our technological leaps, remains remarkably unchanged. Now, let's talk about the economic side of things, because, let's face it, even epic heroes had to worry about the bottom line. The construction of Uruk's walls wasn't just an exercise in architectural bravado. It was a strategic move in the high-stakes game of Mesopotamian geopolitics. Those walls safeguarded not just the king's ego, but the city's prosperity, protecting its bustling trade routes and ensuring that Uruk remained a linchpin in the ancient world's economic tapestry. And what of the scribes who documented Gilgamesh's adventures? These skilled artisans of the written word were the unsung heroes of cultural preservation. painstakingly inscribing each wedge-shaped mark into clay. Their work was a laborious endeavor that required precision and patience, and it was these scribes who ensured that Gilgamesh's exploits would be sung long after the dust settled on his earthly reign. Yet, for all its grandeur, the Epic of Gilgamesh is not without its mythic embellishments. The tale paints Gilgamesh as a demigod who wrestled with divine forces, but strip away the celestial drama, and you're left with a story about a man confronting his own hubris and vulnerability, a tale as much about the heart as it is about heroics. As we wrap up this journey through ancient Mesopotamia, let's take a moment to appreciate the enduring legacy of Gilgamesh. His story is a rich tapestry woven with threads of ambition, friendship, and the relentless pursuit of meaning. It's a narrative that challenges us to ponder our own lives, urging us to consider what legacy we wish to leave behind. Because in the end, whether you're a king of Uruk or just another face in the crowd, it's the stories we create and the impact we have on others that truly grant us immortality. And there you have it, folks, the tale of Gilgamesh, an epic adventure that started on clay tablets and continues to echo through the halls of human history. It's a reminder that while we may not all be kings or conquerors, we all have the power to shape our legacies, one story at a time. So, as you drift off to sleep with visions of ancient heroes and timeless quests, remember that you, too, are part of this grand narrative. Sweet dreams, and may your own epic be as enduring as that of Gilgamesh. 15th century, Italy was a time when talent had to perform a delicate balancing act between thriving under patronage and dodging the plague, both literal and metaphorical. Amidst this backdrop, Leonardo da Vinci was born in 1452 in the small town of Vinci, about 20 miles west of Florence. His entrance into the world wasn't exactly the stuff of noble legends. He was the illegitimate son of a notary, Piero da Vinci, and a peasant woman, Caterina. Let's be honest, the only thing more scandalous in Renaissance Italy than being born out of wedlock was probably wearing last season's doublet. Leonardo's early life was a cocktail of contradictions. Despite his dubious start, he was raised in his father's household, which wasn't such a bad gig after all. It meant access to education and resources that other illegitimate children could only dream of. Piero, perhaps feeling some fatherly pride, or maybe the pressure of societal expectations, ensured that Leonardo was educated in the basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But if you think Leonardo was an obedient student who always colored inside the lines, think again. The young Da Vinci was more interested in the world around him than the dusty tomes of the classroom. He was the kid who would rather sketch a bird mid-flight than recite a passage from the Bible. His notebooks, filled with vibrant drawings and curious observations, were like Renaissance-era Instagram feeds minus the selfies and food pics. At 14, Leonardo was shipped off to Florence to apprentice under Andrea del Verrocchio, one of the leading artists of the time. Now, Verrocchio was no slouch. He was a master sculptor and painter who had clients like the Medici family on speed dial, but even a maestro like Verrocchio had to contend with the natural talent of his young apprentice. This brings us to one of the juiciest tidbits in art history, the story of how Leonardo painted an angel so divine that Verrocchio supposedly hung up his brushes forever. Picture it. They're working on a painting called the Baptism of Christ. Verrocchio handles the main figures, while Leonardo is tasked with painting an angel. And boy, does he deliver. The angel is so ethereal, so impossibly perfect, that Verrocchio allegedly takes one look and decides, you know what, I've had enough of this nonsense. Of course, this story is more myth than fact, but it's fun to imagine the old master throwing his hands up in artistic defeat. The reality is a bit less dramatic. Verrocchio didn't quit painting altogether. He continued to work, albeit with a growing focus on sculpture. But this tale, whether true or not, encapsulates the larger-than-life aura that surrounded Leonardo. He had that rare ability to make established professionals question their career choices. Moreover, this anecdote highlights the competitive atmosphere of Florence, where even the maestros had to stay on their toes. Florence was the Silicon Valley of the Renaissance, a buzzing hub of innovation, creativity, and intense artistic rivalry. If you weren't pushing the envelope, you might as well have been pushing daisies. Economically, Florence was a powerhouse. Thanks to its thriving textile industry and banking sector, the city was flush with cash. The Medici family, who ruled Florence like benevolent mob bosses, were the ultimate patrons of the arts. Their wealth and influence provided a fertile ground for geniuses like Leonardo to flourish. But it wasn't all gold leaf and garlands. Artists were often at the mercy of their patrons' whims, and work was far from guaranteed. It was a gig economy centuries before Uber. Socially, Florence was a city of contrasts. It was a place where the high-minded ideals of humanism coexisted with the cutthroat realities of political intrigue. Leonardo, with his curious mind and insatiable thirst for knowledge, fit right in. His self-directed studies in anatomy, mechanics, and nature were unconventional, to say the least. While other artists were perfecting religious iconography, Leonardo was dissecting corpses to understand human anatomy better. He was the Renaissance equivalent of a mad scientist, jotting down notes in his infamous backward script, presumably to confound any nosy rivals or future historians. In a world where conforming was the norm, Leonardo's iconoclasm set him apart. His genius was self-taught, his knowledge a patchwork of observation, experimentation, and relentless curiosity. He was a Renaissance man in every sense of the word, a scientist, an artist, an inventor, and a bit of a rebel. And while the romantic tales of his life often veer into the fantastical, they hint at the extraordinary reality of a man who was, in every sense, ahead of his time. As we continue to explore his life and legacy, it's clear that Leonardo wasn't just a product of his age. He was its defining force. Now, let's dive into the labyrinth of Leonardo's mind, where art and science waltzed in a perpetual dance of curiosity. If Renaissance Italy was the stage, Leonardo was its most audacious performer, constantly pushing the boundaries of what was known and what could be imagined. While others were busy painting cherubic angels, Leonardo was elbow-deep in cadavers, sketching muscles and sinew with the precision of a surgeon and the flair of an artist. This fascination with anatomy wasn't just a passing phase. Between 1507 and 1513, Leonardo dissected around 30 human bodies, an activity that would have made most people of his time lose their lunch, or their heads, considering the church wasn't exactly handing out medals for corpse dissection. His notebooks, filled with over 240 detailed drawings and thousands of notes on human anatomy, were like the Renaissance version of a medical textbook, minus the glossy pages and ISBN number. While today we might think of Leonardo as a visionary, his contemporaries probably saw him as that eccentric guy who spent too much time with dead bodies. But his anatomical studies were revolutionary, revealing insights that wouldn't be confirmed until centuries later. For instance, his depiction of the human spine was so accurate that it left modern anatomists scratching their heads and wondering if he had access to a time machine. Leonardo was essentially the Renaissance's answer to Gray's Anatomy, minus the drama and steamy hospital romances. But why, you might ask, did these brilliant insights remain hidden in dusty notebooks for centuries? Well, unlike today where you can just hit publish on a blog post, disseminating information in the 16th century was a bit more complicated. Leonardo's writings were notoriously hard to read, thanks to his infamous mirror writing, a neat trick to confound intellectual property thieves, but a massive headache for anyone else trying to decipher his notes. Plus, publishing wasn't something you did with a click of a button. It was expensive, labor-intensive, and something Leonardo never got around to doing. In a way, he was that brilliant but disorganized friend who plans a road trip and forgets to book a car. Now, let's pivot to Leonardo's engineering exploits. This was a man who saw potential in the mundane, turning everyday observations into blueprints for fantastical machines. From conceptualizing a helicopter, yes, a helicopter in the 15th century, to designing a robotic knight capable of sitting up and waving its arms, Leonardo's mind was a factory of ideas that seemed both ahead of their time and slightly bonkers. It's no surprise that many of his inventions never left the sketchbook. The reason: simple economics and technology. The materials and tools available during the Renaissance were about as advanced as a medieval Tinder app. Not very. Iron was expensive, mechanical precision was a pipe dream, and the scientific method was still learning to crawl. Leonardo had the vision, sure, but lacked the resources to bring his wildest ideas to life. It's like inventing a smartphone in the Stone Age. You might have the genius, but good luck finding a lithium battery. And then there's the legend of Leonardo's flying machine, which sounds like something straight out of a steampunk novel. He meticulously studied the flight of birds, scribbling down observations as if he were planning a TED talk on aerodynamics. His designs featured wings, pulleys, and pedals, all ingeniously sketched out in his characteristic style. But here's the kicker. There's no evidence he ever built the thing. Leonardo was like that friend who talks about running a marathon but never quite makes it past the registration form. The reality was, Renaissance Italy wasn't exactly ready to take to the skies. The materials needed for a successful flight, lightweight metals, strong but flexible fabrics, simply didn't exist. So, most of Leonardo's flying fantasies remained grounded, a testament to a mind that dared to dream beyond its means. He was a man living in the future, trapped in a world that was still figuring out how to make sturdy bridges. Speaking of bridges, let's not forget the time Leonardo proposed a 240-meter-long bridge to Sultan Bayezid Roman II of the Ottoman Empire. It was an idea so grand, so ambitious, that the Sultan probably choked on his kebab just reading it. This bridge, which would have spanned the Golden Horn in Istanbul, was never built, not because it wasn't feasible, but because it was perhaps too audacious for its time. And yet, in 2001, a smaller version of Leonardo's design was constructed in Norway, proving that sometimes good ideas just need to marinate for a few centuries. Leonardo's restless spirit pushed him into realms that few dared to tread. He was a scientist in an artist's body, a Renaissance man in an age that was still coming to grips with its own potential. His insatiable curiosity led him to study everything from the flow of water to the mechanics of the human heart. He was like a kid in a cosmic candy store, grabbing at every shiny piece of knowledge with unbridled enthusiasm. Sure, Leonardo's life was filled with more unfinished projects than a procrastinator's to-do list, but that's what makes him so fascinating. He wasn't afraid to explore the unknown, to scribble down the impossible, and to dream of a world where machines flew and bridges defied gravity. In the world of Leonardo da Vinci, the line between art and science wasn't just blurred. It was beautifully intertwined in a dance of endless possibilities. And while his contemporaries may have been baffled by his pursuits, history has rendered its verdict. Leonardo was not just a man of his time, but a beacon for ours. As we look back at his life, it's clear that Leonardo was more than just an artist or an inventor. He was a pioneer who dared to ask, what if, when everyone else was content with what is. His legacy isn't just in the masterpieces he left behind or the inventions that never took flight. It's in the spirit of curiosity and exploration that continues to inspire us today. But don't pack up your history backpacks just yet. There's still more to uncover about this remarkable man and the world he inhabited. Stay tuned as we continue our journey through the life and times of Leonardo da Vinci, where the adventure is far from over. As we dive deeper into the dazzling world of Leonardo da Vinci, we can't ignore the elephant in the art gallery, his most famous masterpieces, The Last Supper and Mona Lisa. These aren't just paintings, they're cultural icons, with more layers than a mille-feuille pastry and just as deliciously complex. But hold your applause, because the stories behind these artworks are more tangled than a bowl of spaghetti. Let's start with The Last Supper. You know, the one depicting Jesus breaking bread with his disciples just before Judas went all Benedict Arnold on him. Leonardo painted it between 1495 and 1498 on the dining hall wall of Santa Maria del Grazie in Milan. But this wasn't your average wall decor. It was commissioned by Ludovico Sforza, Duke of Milan, a man who knew a thing or two about power and wanted a mural that screamed, "I'm cultured and pious, but also look at my fabulous dining room." Leonardo's approach was revolutionary. Instead of using the tried-and-true fresco technique, which involved painting on wet plaster, Leonardo opted for an experimental method. He painted on dry walls, mixing his pigments with oil and tempera. This gave him more time to perfect the details, but it also meant the painting started to deteriorate faster than a reality TV star's reputation. By the time the 16th century rolled around, the piece was already flaking like sunburnt skin. And if you think that's bad, imagine Napoleon's troops using the dining hall as a stable in the late 18th century. Yes, The Last Supper was quite literally horsing around. But let's talk about the painting's content. It's a snapshot of high drama, capturing the exact moment Jesus announces one of his disciples will betray him. The apostles react with a range of emotions, each etched with such intensity you'd think they were auditioning for a Renaissance reality show. And here's a nugget of intrigue. Leonardo was reportedly so meticulous that he spent several days just staring at his work, searching for the perfect expression of Judas. His process was less paint by numbers and more wait for divine inspiration, which led to plenty of delays, to the point where the Duke probably considered commissioning a sundial to track Leonardo's progress. Then there's the Mona Lisa, arguably the most famous face on the planet. Painted between 1503 and 1506, this enigmatic portrait has launched 1,000 theories and more conspiracy theories than a government cover-up. The subject is widely believed to be Lisa Gherardini, wife of Florentine merchant Francesco del Giocondo. But why is she smiling? Is she amused, smug, or just had a really good lunch? The world may never know, but what we do know is that Leonardo's technique was as intricate as the smile itself. He used sfumato, a method that layers translucent glazes to create soft transitions between colors, giving the Mona Lisa her ethereal quality. Leonardo's obsession with perfection meant the Mona Lisa was never technically finished. He toted it around like a modern-day influencer with a designer handbag, tweaking it here and there. When he moved to France in 1516, he took the painting with him, and it eventually ended up in the Louvre, where it remains a must-see for anyone in Paris, right after croissants and the Eiffel Tower. Fun fact. In 1911, the Mona Lisa was stolen by an Italian handyman who thought it belonged back in Italy. It was missing for 2 years, proving that even masterpieces aren't immune to a bit of drama. But why did Leonardo choose to focus on these particular pieces? The answer, as always, involves money and politics. Leonardo wasn't just an artist. He was a businessman who understood the importance of patronage and the delicate dance of keeping his patrons happy. In Renaissance Italy, artists were often at the mercy of their wealthy patrons, who could make or break their careers with a single commission. It was a world where your artistic vision often had to align with someone else's checkbook and political aspirations. Economic pressures were always looming. Florence and Milan were wealthy, but they were also places of constant political upheaval. Sforza, for instance, wasn't commissioning The Last Supper purely out of religious devotion. He was banking on it solidifying his legacy. Meanwhile, the Gherardini family's commission of the Mona Lisa was likely a status symbol, a way to flaunt their wealth and influence. Leonardo had to navigate these waters with the skill of a diplomat, balancing his artistic integrity with the demands of those who held the purse strings. And let's not forget Leonardo's infamous procrastination. His perfectionism was both his greatest strength and his Achilles' heel. He was known to leave projects half-finished, moving on to new ideas at the drop of a hat. It wasn't just a lack of focus. It was an insatiable curiosity that pulled him in 1,000 directions. Leonardo was the kind of guy who'd start painting, get distracted by the play of light on a nearby leaf, and end up sketching botanical diagrams for the next month. His patrons must have had the patience of saints, or the exasperation of parents waiting for their teenager to clean their room. Despite, or perhaps because of these quirks, Leonardo's techniques redefined the art world. His use of perspective, anatomy, and emotion set a new standard for realism, influencing generations of artists. He turned canvas into a stage where the human condition played out in rich detail. In a world where art was often formulaic, Leonardo injected humanity, making his subjects breathe with life. Yet, even as we marvel at his genius, it's crucial to remember the man behind the myth. Leonardo wasn't a divine figure chiseling masterpieces from clouds. He was a human, navigating the complexities of his time, juggling the whims of patrons, and wrestling with his own unrelenting standards. His legacy isn't just in his art, but in his relentless pursuit of knowledge and beauty. So, as we leave the realm of Leonardo's artistic endeavors, remember that each painting is a testament to a mind that saw the world not just as it was, but as it could be. We'll continue to unravel the enigmatic tapestry of his life, exploring the scientific and artistic frontiers he dared to cross. Stay tuned, because the Renaissance roller coaster is far from finished, and there are more twists, turns, and tantalizing tales to come. As we continue our journey through Leonardo's life, let's fast forward to his twilight years, where the Renaissance rock star finds himself taking a French detour. You see, by 1516, Leonardo was no spring chicken. He was 64, practically ancient by Renaissance standards, where life expectancy was about as long as a TikTok video. But instead of slowing down, he was gearing up for his next adventure. Enter King Francis I, the young, art-loving French monarch who was basically Leonardo's ultimate fanboy. Francis invited Leonardo to France, promising him the cushy title of premier painter and engineer and architect to the king, which is a fancy way of saying, do whatever you want, just make it awesome. So off Leonardo went, crossing the Alps with his loyal assistants and a few of his prized paintings, including the Mona Lisa. He settled in Château du Clos-Lucé, a stone's throw from the king's residence at the Château d'Amboise. This wasn't just a retirement home with a view. It was a creative playground where Leonardo could tinker away without the pressure of commission deadlines breathing down his neck. And let's be real, after decades of hustling for patrons who had the patience of a caffeinated squirrel, this must have felt like hitting the Renaissance jackpot. But life in France wasn't without its quirks. Leonardo, with his Italian flair and eccentricities, was a bit of an oddball in the French court. Imagine trying to explain to a group of French nobles why you spend your afternoons dissecting frogs or sketching flying machines. It's like introducing gluten-free avocado toast at a medieval banquet. You're bound to get some raised eyebrows. Yet, Leonardo found a kindred spirit in Francis, who was captivated by his genius and probably just as baffled by his oddities. In this new chapter, Leonardo wasn't just a court artist. He was the Renaissance equivalent of a celebrity scientist, a walking TED talk who could speak on everything from the anatomy of horses to the engineering of bridges. His workshop in Clos-Lucé was a hive of innovation, filled with sketches of inventions that would never see the light of day, but nevertheless dazzled those who peeked over his shoulder. And while Leonardo was officially retired, he didn't exactly kick back with a goblet of wine. Instead, he continued to sketch, plan, and pontificate until his final days. Leonardo passed away in 1519, leaving behind a legacy that was as sprawling as his notebooks. But here's where things get interesting. The man we revere today as a universal genius wasn't always seen that way. In fact, during his lifetime, Leonardo's reputation was more like a roller coaster ride than a steady ascent to greatness. For starters, Leonardo didn't publish his scientific findings, which meant that his groundbreaking work in anatomy and engineering remained locked in his cryptic notebooks. It's like writing the greatest novel of the century, but leaving it in a drawer. His contemporaries knew him more for his art than his scientific pursuits, and even then, he was often criticized for his lack of productivity. Ironically, Leonardo's penchant for starting projects without finishing them was both his charm and his curse. Fast forward to the years after his death, and Leonardo's fame started to morph into legend, thanks in large part to his early biographers. Giorgio Vasari, in particular, played a pivotal role in cementing Leonardo's status. Writing in the 16th century, Vasari's Lives of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects painted a picture of Leonardo as a superhuman figure, a man whose talents were as boundless as the sky. Vasari's romanticized anecdotes, like Leonardo's miraculous angel painting that supposedly drove Verrocchio to quit, added layers of myth to an already fascinating life. But let's not kid ourselves. The story of Leonardo as a universal genius is more nuanced than the tales spun by Vasari and company. Sure, he was brilliant, but he was also a human being with doubts, flaws, and the occasional creative block. Leonardo's genius wasn't an ethereal gift from the heavens. It was the result of relentless curiosity and a refusal to settle for the ordinary. He was the kind of guy who wouldn't just accept that the sky is blue. He'd want to know how and why it's blue, and then probably try to replicate it with pigments in his studio. Leonardo's posthumous reputation is a testament to the power of storytelling. Over time, his myth grew, transcending the man himself. He became a symbol of the Renaissance ideal, the quintessential polymath who blurred the lines between art and science. But as we peel back the layers, it's crucial to remember that the real Leonardo was a man who thrived on the edge of chaos. juggling sketches and ideas with the agility of a circus performer. So, as we inch closer to the end of our exploration, keep in mind that the story of Leonardo da Vinci is as much about the man as it is about the myth. His legend is a patchwork of truth and embellishment, a reflection of an age that cherished both innovation and imagination. And while the myths add a dash of romance to his story, the reality is no less compelling. Leonardo was a man who dared to dream beyond the confines of his time, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire and intrigue. But hold onto your berets, because our journey isn't over yet. In the next chapter, we'll delve into the broader impact of Leonardo's work, exploring how his ideas and innovations rippled through history, influencing generations of thinkers, artists, and scientists. So, stay tuned, because the saga of Leonardo da Vinci is far from finished, and there's plenty more to uncover in the life of this extraordinary Renaissance man. With Leonardo's legacy casting a long shadow over both art and science, it's time to untangle the myth from the man and see how his genius continues to echo through the ages. Leonardo's fascination with anatomy, for instance, wasn't just a quirky hobby that made him the oddball at Renaissance dinner parties. His meticulous dissections and detailed sketches laid the groundwork for modern anatomical studies. Imagine a world where doctors still believed in humors and used leeches like they were the latest health craze. Leonardo's drawings, with over 240 anatomical sketches, gave future scientists like Andreas Vesalius the tools to revolutionize medicine. It was like handing a cheat sheet to the next generation, minus the risk of getting caught. In the realm of art, Leonardo's use of techniques like esfumado and chiaroscuro changed the game. Before him, paintings were more like medieval clip art, flat, unrealistic, and about as expressive as a poker face. But Leonardo, he brought emotion and depth, turning canvases into windows to the soul. His ability to capture human expression inspired artists like Raphael and Caravaggio, who took his innovations and ran with them like they were competing in the Renaissance Olympics. Today, his influence is as visible as ever, with artists still striving to capture the same depth and realism that Leonardo pioneered. But let's not get too caught up in the romanticism. While it's easy to picture Leonardo as a lone genius, the reality is he was a product of his times. The Renaissance wasn't all art and enlightenment. It was also a period of cutthroat competition and patronage. Leonardo had to hustle for his commissions, balancing the whims of patrons with his own artistic ambitions. The Medici family, for example, weren't just art aficionados. They were the Bill Gates of the Renaissance, wielding influence and money like a double-edged sword. Leonardo's ability to navigate these waters was as much a testament to his strategic acumen as his artistic talent. Economically, the Renaissance was a time of both opportunity and instability. Cities like Florence and Milan were booming, thanks in part to banking and trade. But this wealth was precarious, often tied to the political fortunes of ruling families. Leonardo's patrons, like Ludovico Sforza, could be toppled as easily as a house of cards. When the winds of politics changed, so too did the fortunes of those who depended on these powerful figures. Leonardo's career was intimately tied to these dynamics, making his achievements all the more remarkable given the ever-shifting landscape. And then there are the myths, those tantalizing tales that add a dash of color to Leonardo's already vivid life. Take, for instance, the story of him building a giant horse for the Duke of Milan. It sounds like the setup for a Renaissance sitcom. Leonardo spends years working on a massive clay model, only for the bronze meant to cast it to be repurposed into cannons when the French invade. It's a classic tale of grand ambitions meeting harsh realities, a reminder that even the greatest minds can be stymied by the unpredictability of history. Modern perspectives on Leonardo often amplify these myths, turning his life into a tapestry of legend and lore. There's a reason Leonardo appears in everything from novels to movies. His life is like a historical soap opera with plot twists that would make even Shakespeare raise an eyebrow. Yet, in doing so, we sometimes lose sight of the real person behind the myth. Leonardo wasn't just a genius. He was a man driven by insatiable curiosity, grappling with the limits of his time while dreaming of the infinite. His paradoxical genius lies in this tension between the possible and the impossible. Leonardo dared to sketch flying machines long before the Wright brothers took to the skies. and he envisioned mechanical wonders that wouldn't be realized until centuries later. It's this blend of visionary thinking and tangible achievement that continues to captivate us today. We're drawn to the idea of a man who could peer beyond the horizon, even when his feet were firmly planted in the past. We wrap up our jaunt through the life of Leonardo da Vinci. It's clear his impact is as enduring as it is multifaceted. His legacy is a testament to the power of imagination, an invitation to question the status quo and explore the unexplored. Whether through art or science, Leonardo's contributions remind us that the boundaries between disciplines are as permeable as our willingness to cross them. So, what's the final verdict on Leonardo? Was he a tortured genius, a consummate procrastinator, or simply a man who dared to ask, what if? When everyone else was stuck on, why bother? Perhaps he was all of these and more, a Renaissance enigma wrapped in a shroud of sketches and unfinished symphonies. He remains a beacon of creativity and curiosity, a reminder that sometimes the most profound discoveries come from those who aren't afraid to color outside the lines. In the end, Leonardo da Vinci's story is not just about the man himself, but about the enduring human spirit. His life challenges us to embrace our own paradoxes, to find beauty in complexity, and to dream bigger than our circumstances might suggest. So, as you drift off to sleep with visions of flying machines and smiling portraits, remember, in the grand tapestry of history, Leonardo's thread is one of endless possibility. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's the real magic of his legacy. If you ever thought your family reunions were complicated, wait till you hear about the Hittites. Rising around 1600 BCE from the dusty plains of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, if you're keeping score at home, the Hittite Empire wasn't your typical ancient backyard barbecue. These folks knew how to play the Game of Thrones long before HBO turned it into a blood-spattered TV sensation. Let's set the stage. Anatolia, a land of rugged highlands and fertile valleys, was the perfect cocktail for a burgeoning empire. You see, the Hittites didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They were a blend of Indo-European migrants and local Anatolian tribes, shaking hands and sharing recipes, if you will. But instead of exchanging casserole dishes, they swapped political alliances and military tactics. Their capital, Harusa, was founded like a scene from an ancient reality show. Extreme Makeover, Empire Edition. Perched on the banks of the Kizilirmak River, Harusa wasn't just a city. It was a fortress built to withstand both time and intruders. The walls stretched over 6 kilometers, so if you lived there, your daily step count was probably off the charts. And those gates, massive stone lions guarded them, because nothing says, "Welcome to our humble abode," quite like a pair of fierce feline statues. But how did they manage to expand from this rocky start to ruling vast swaths of the Near East? It wasn't just brute force, though they had that in spades with their iron chariots and battle-hardened troops. No, the Hittites were masters of political chess, and their favorite piece was the queen. Strategic marriages were the Hittite rulers' secret weapon, where sons and daughters were less like beloved family members and more like elite bargaining chips. King Hattusili I, for example, was a man with a plan. Like a seasoned diplomat, he married off his children into powerful families, ensuring that the Hittites were always holding the best cards. It was a shrewd tactic that made allies out of potential enemies. So, while you might be stuck with Uncle Barb at the dinner table, Hattusili was aligning his dynasty with the top dogs of the Bronze Age. Let's not sugarcoat it, though. These alliances weren't sealed with heartfelt vows or romantic sunsets. They were as cold as a winter's night in Anatolia. Take King Muwatalli Roman II, for instance, who cozied up to the Egyptians through marriage diplomacy, securing a peace that allowed him to focus on more pressing matters, like not getting clobbered by the Assyrians. It was a pragmatic approach, because when your neighbors include heavyweights like Egypt and Assyria, you don't just bake them a pie and hope for the best. Now, some might say that the Hittites were simply opportunists, but in reality, they were survivalists. They understood the harsh realities of empire building. Loyalty was bought, not given freely. And let's be honest, if you were trying to keep a sprawling empire together with a mix of diplomacy and warfare, you'd probably make a few calculated marriages too. Despite their cunning, the Hittites' rise was not without bumps in the road. Their early years were filled with internal strife and rebellion. Imagine the chaos of a medieval soap opera, but but with more bronze swords and fewer commercial breaks. This internal turbulence was often smoothed over by clever political maneuvers, and yes, more marriages. They knew that while swords could win battles, alliances won empires. The myth of the Hittite Empire as a monolithic, iron-fisted regime overlooks the delicate balancing act required to maintain power. They were as much diplomats as they were warriors, understanding that an empire's strength lay not just in its armies, but in its ability to navigate a web of political intrigue with the finesse of a spider on caffeine. In essence, the Hittite rulers were the ultimate pragmatists. They leveraged every possible advantage, whether through the barrel of a chariot or the altar of a wedding. So next time you're at a family gathering, remember the Hittites. Those ancient matchmakers turned strategic unions into an art form, proving that in the game of ancient empires, the best offense was sometimes a well-placed marriage proposal. If strategic marriages were the Hittites' bread and butter, then military innovation was the icing on their empire-building cake. You see, the Hittites didn't just dabble in warfare. They turned it into an art form, their piece de resistance, the chariot. But don't be fooled into thinking they invented it. Nope, that honor likely goes to the Sumerians or the folks from the steppes. What the Hittites did, however, was take this ancient heart rod and turn it into a chariot of fire, metaphorically, of course. The Hittite chariot was a sleek beast, designed for speed and maneuverability. With a lightweight frame and a three-man crew, driver, warrior, and shield-bearer, it was the ancient equivalent of a Ferrari, minus the leather seats and Bluetooth connectivity. This was a game-changer in the Bronze Age battlefield, allowing for rapid attacks and retreats. It was like the ancient world's version of a blitzkrieg, before blitzkrieg was a thing. Now, let's talk about the Battle of Kadesh, circa 1274 BCE. Picture it as the Super Bowl of the ancient world, except instead of a stadium, you've got a dusty plain near the Orontes River, and instead of sports fans, you've got thousands of Hittite and Egyptian soldiers, all with one thing on their minds, not dying. Ramses Roman II, the Egyptian pharaoh, was looking to flex his muscles and reclaim territory in Syria. Muwatalli Roman II, the Hittite king, wasn't going to let that happen without a fight. Kadesh was a clash of titans, a military showdown that saw upwards of 5,000 chariots. Yes, you heard that right, charging into each other like two armies of mechanized bulls. Ramses Roman II even claimed to have fought off the Hittites single-handedly, but let's take that with a grain of salt the size of the Great Pyramid. What's more likely is that both sides fought to a standstill, their chariots stuck in an ancient gridlock of chaos and confusion. But here's where the story gets interesting. Instead of descending into endless cycles of revenge and retribution, the Hittites and Egyptians did something unprecedented. They sat down at the negotiation table. The resulting Treaty of Kadesh is often hailed as the world's first known international peace treaty. Ramses and Hattusili Roman III, Muwatalli's successor, agreed to a mutual defense pact, promising to look out for each other's interests. Think of it as the original Bro Code, inscribed in cuneiform. This treaty wasn't just a diplomatic nicety, it was a strategic necessity. Both empires were stretched thin, both economically and militarily, and neither could afford to keep battering each other into oblivion. The treaty ensured that they could focus on other pressing matters, like the pesky Assyrians who were always lurking around, ready to crash the party. Ancient warfare, it seems, was less about glory and more about pragmatism. The Hittites understood that sometimes the best way to win a war was to avoid fighting it altogether. Their military strategies were brutal yet brilliant, showcasing a blend of borrowed innovations and homegrown tactics. They knew that while swords and chariots could win battles, treaties and alliances won wars. It was a harsh lesson in the realpolitik of empire building. The romance of the chariot charge and the allure of the warrior king might capture the imagination, but the reality was far more nuanced. The Hittites weren't just warriors, they were strategists playing a long game. They borrowed what worked, adapted it to their needs, and when push came to shove, they knew when to swap the sword for the pen. So next time you imagine ancient empires locked in endless combat, remember the Hittites. They didn't just charge into battle for the sake of glory. They weighed the costs, calculated the risks, and sometimes, just sometimes, they chose the path of peace. In the grand tapestry of history, their legacy is one of both conquest and compromise, a reminder that even in the brutal world of ancient warfare, there was room for diplomacy and innovation. the tale of the Hittites is far from over. As we delve deeper into their cultural achievements and lasting influence, we'll uncover more about this remarkable civilization that carved its name into the annals of history with both sword and stylus. Stay tuned, because the past is far more intricate than any mythos we could conjure. Now, just when you think you've got the Hittites pegged as shrewd warriors and political chess players, they throw a curveball with their cultural achievements. Imagine an empire that not only thrived on battlefield bravado, but also laid down the law. And I mean literally. The Hittites were the ancient equivalent of those folks who can juggle flaming torches while reciting pi to the 100th decimal. Their legal system, for instance, was surprisingly modern, a testament to their penchant for mixing practicality with a dash of flair. The Hittite legal code, dating back to around 1650–1500 BCE, was a sprawling document encompassing nearly 200 laws. Think of it as the law and order of the Bronze Age, minus the dramatic music and gavel-banging judges. These laws covered everything from property rights to personal injury, with penalties that seem almost progressive compared to their contemporaries. Instead of the old an eye for an eye routine, the Hittites favored fines and compensation, a sort of ancient version of let's settle this over coffee and a reasonable settlement. Take theft, for example. If you pilfered someone's livestock, you didn't lose a hand or face a firing squad. Instead, you coughed up restitution, and sometimes even a bit of interest. It was a pragmatic approach, acknowledging that punishing labor with more labor wasn't exactly a sustainable economic model. The Hittites understood that a functioning society needed people to, well, function. But wait, there's more. The Hittites had laws about pigs. Yes, pigs. They regulated everything from their breeding to their consumption, because even in ancient times, bacon was serious business. These laws might sound trivial, but they reveal a society deeply rooted in agriculture, where the pig was a prized possession and a tasty breakfast option. And then there was the matter of family law, which reads like an ancient soap opera with legal backing. Adultery, for instance, was a big no-no, but the punishment was surprisingly lenient. Instead of a death sentence, the guilty party might face divorce or a fine, reflecting a society that valued social stability over draconian justice. The Hittites seemed to grasp that a scorched earth policy wasn't conducive to keeping the peace or the population. Now, let's pivot to another facet of Hittite brilliance, literature and mythology. If their legal system was the brains, their literature was the soul. The Hittites were prolific writers, leaving behind tablets filled with myths, prayers, and treaties. Their mythology was a rich tapestry, where gods and humans interacted in a cosmic drama that would make even the most seasoned Netflix bingers sit up and take notice. One standout is the epic of Gilgamesh, a Mesopotamian import that the Hittites couldn't resist giving their own twist. But their homegrown myths were just as compelling, featuring gods who were, frankly, as flawed and relatable as your average reality TV star. Take Teshub, the storm god. He was known for his fiery temper and turbulent love life, a divine soap opera played out in the heavens. These myths weren't just bedtime stories. They were moral guides and cultural touchstones. They explained the unexplainable, gave meaning to natural phenomena, and offered a divine rationale for human follies. The Hittites didn't just worship their gods. They conversed with them, negotiated with them, and sometimes even tricked them. It was a pragmatic spirituality that acknowledged the gods' power, but also their capriciousness. What's fascinating is how these myths and laws interwove, creating a society that balanced the mystical with the mundane. Religion wasn't just about temples and sacrifices. It was a framework for understanding the world and navigating the everyday chaos of life. This blend of the divine and the practical was a hallmark of Hittite governance, where priests and kings often shared power like co-CEOs of a cosmic corporation. And let's not leave out their architectural feats. The Hittites were master builders, and their temples were more than just sacred spaces. They were community hubs, administrative centers, and symbols of imperial might. Take the iconic Lion Gate of Hadusa, where massive stone lions stood guard like ancient bouncers, ensuring only the worthy passed through. These structures weren't just about grandeur. They were statements of power, resilience, and Hittite ingenuity. But before we get too misty-eyed about the Hittites, let's bust a few myths. Contrary to romanticized visions of a unified empire, the The Hittites were often a hot mess of internal strife and rebellion. Their ability to maintain control was as much about putting out fires as it was about lighting them. The empire was a patchwork quilt of cultures and peoples, sometimes stitched together with more hope than thread. Their pragmatic approach to governance, though, was a lesson in realpolitik. When faced with rebellion, the Hittites didn't just crush dissent with an iron fist. They also offered carrots alongside sticks, land grants, tax breaks, and positions of power to those who towed the line. It was a balancing act worthy of Cirque du Soleil, where the Hittites walked the tightrope between control and chaos. So, what's the takeaway here? The Hittites, with their legal innovations, mythological musings, and pragmatic governance, were more than just a footnote in the dusty pages of history. They were a complex, dynamic civilization that understood the power of balance between war and diplomacy, myth and reality, chaos and order. They weren't just Bronze Age warriors wielding swords. They were architects of a society that valued reason as much as might, a legacy that resonates even today. As we journey onwards, there's still more to uncover about this intriguing empire that left an indelible mark on history. Stay tuned, because the best stories are those that keep unfolding, revealing new layers with each turn of the page. Now, speaking of unfolding stories, let's dive into the Hittites' economic and technological prowess, because they weren't just swinging swords and sealing diplomatic deals. Nope, these folks were also mastering the art of metallurgy and turning agriculture into an empire-sustaining machine. Picture this. The Hittites, often dubbed the first iron workers, were the ancient equivalent of today's tech innovators, although instead of Wi-Fi and smartphones, they were racking iron tools and weapons around 1500 BCE. Now, let me clarify. The Hittites didn't invent iron smelting. That credit likely belongs to those industrious folks over in the Caucasus region who stumbled upon the process while trying to make a mean barbecue pit. But the Hittites were the ones who turned this discovery into a cornerstone of their empire, much like how a savvy startup takes a niche idea and sells it to the masses. They realized that iron, despite being harder to work with than bronze, was stronger and more abundant. You could say they were the original disruptors, swapping out the Bronze Age for the Iron Age like they were upgrading from dial-up to fiber optic. This metallurgical mastery wasn't just for show. It had some serious economic and military implications. Iron tools meant more efficient farming, which meant more food, which meant more people. And more people meant, you guessed it, a bigger army. So, while other civilizations were still polishing their bronze swords, the Hittites were marching into battle with iron weapons that could slice through bronze like hot knives through butter. It was the ancient equivalent of bringing a bazooka to a knife fight. Now, let's talk agriculture. The Hittites were no slouches when it came to farming. They developed sophisticated techniques that would make even modern-day agronomists nod in approval. For starters, they practiced crop rotation, because they knew that planting the same crop year after year was a surefire way to turn fertile fields into a dust bowl. They also dug extensive irrigation channels that put today's garden hoses to shame, ensuring their fields were as lush as a well-watered lawn. Their knack for agriculture wasn't just about feeding their populace, it was about fueling trade. The Hittites' strategic location in Anatolia, right smack in the middle of ancient trade routes, made them a hub for commerce. Picture caravans loaded with grains, textiles, and metals, snaking their way through the empire like ancient Amazon deliveries. The Hittites weren't just trading goods, they were exporting influence, weaving a tapestry of economic ties that stretched from Mesopotamia to the Aegean. But let's not get carried away with visions of a bustling ancient mall. Trade in the ancient world was as much about survival as it was about profit. The Hittites knew that a stable economy required more than just goods. It required alliances and a steady flow of resources. This is where things get interesting. While the romanticized version of ancient commerce might conjure images of bustling marketplaces filled with shouting merchants and exotic goods, the reality was often more like an ancient version of Survivor. It was a delicate balance of negotiation and necessity, with every transaction potentially tipping the scales between prosperity and famine. And what about those fabled trade networks? The Hittites were savvy enough to know that they couldn't go it alone. They needed partners, and they found them in unlikely places. Take their relationship with the Mycenaeans of Greece, for example. despite the distance, over 1,000 kilometers as the crow flies. The Hittites and Mycenaeans traded like long-distance pen pals. Gold, silver, and pottery flowed between them, each side eager to get their hands on the other's treasures. It was the ancient version of an eBay auction, but with a lot more risk and no return policy. So, what fueled this economic engine? In short, necessity and opportunity. The Hittites understood that an empire was only as strong as its economy, and they leveraged every advantage they could muster. This included controlling vital trade routes, such as those connecting the Mediterranean with the Near East. These routes were the lifelines of the ancient world, carrying not just goods, but also ideas and technologies. It was a time when a new alloy or farming technique could mean the difference between feast and famine, peace and war. But let's not sugarcoat it. The Hittites' economic success was a double-edged sword. Their prosperity made them a target, attracting the envy of neighbors and raiders alike. The very trade networks that enriched them also made them vulnerable, as rival powers sought to control these lucrative pathways. It's like being the only house on the block with a pool during a heat wave. Everyone wants a piece of the action. And speaking of action, let's address the elephant in the room, the decline of the Hittite Empire. No empire lasts forever, and the Hittites were no exception. Their reliance on trade and agriculture, while initially their strength, eventually contributed to their downfall. By the late 13th century BCE, the empire was facing pressures from all sides. Internal strife, combined with external threats from marauding sea peoples and aggressive neighbors, strained their resources and tested their resilience. Their sophisticated agricultural systems, once their pride and joy, became a burden during times of drought or crop failure. Ironically, the very innovations that had propelled them to greatness now exposed them to new vulnerabilities. As trade routes shifted and competitors emerged, the Hittites found themselves struggling to maintain their economic dominance. It was a harsh reminder that in the Game of Thrones, even the best-laid plans can unravel. Yet, despite the challenges, the legacy of the Hittites endures. Their economic and technological advancements left an indelible mark on history, influencing subsequent civilizations and setting the stage for future innovations. Their story is a testament to the power of adaptation and the relentless pursuit of progress, even in the face of adversity. So, as we wrap up this chapter, what's the takeaway? The Hittites were more than just warriors and diplomats. They were pioneers of commerce and technology, blazing trails that others would follow. Their ability to harness the power of iron and agriculture transformed their empire into a powerhouse, illustrating the age-old truth that innovation is the key to success. But as their story shows, even the most advanced civilizations must navigate the treacherous waters of change, where every decision can tip the balance between glory and oblivion. And with that, we leave the Hittites on the brink of their next challenge, as the forces of history continue to unfold. Stay tuned, because there's more to discover about this remarkable empire and the lessons it holds for us today. As we stand on the precipice of the Hittite Empire's decline, it's worth noting that even the most robust ancient empires were like elaborate Jenga towers. One wrong move, and the whole thing could come crashing down. So, what pulled the blocks out from under the Hittites? Well, grab your metaphorical popcorn, because their fall wasn't a straightforward tale of heroes and villains. It was a messy narrative of bad timing, bad luck, and a few too many enemies at the gates. Let's start with internal strife, because who doesn't love a good dose of familial drama? The Hittite Empire was like a soap opera with swords, where royal feuds and power struggles were as common as plot twists. By the late 13th century BCE, this internal discord was stretching the empire's resources thinner than a cheap toga. King after king found themselves juggling rebellious vassals and ambitious nobles, all while trying not to drop the empire's metaphorical baby. It was like watching a tightrope walker who's a little too confident. Eventually, someone's going to slip. Now, if you think internal chaos was enough to topple an empire, think again. The Hittites were also feeling the squeeze from external pressures, and this wasn't just a little nudge. We're talking the full weight of the Bronze Age collapse pressing down on them like a cosmic anvil. Around 1200 BCE, a mysterious wave of destruction swept across the ancient Near East, toppling civilizations like dominoes. Scholars still debate exactly what caused this chaos: climate change, natural disasters, raiding sea peoples, or maybe all of the above. But for the Hittites, it was like being caught in a perfect storm of catastrophe. Speaking of the sea peoples, these marauding bands were the ancient world's equivalent of a biker gang rolling into town. They wreaked havoc along the Mediterranean coasts, and the Hittites weren't spared from their rampage. These invaders weren't just after a quick plunder, they were looking to settle, and their arrival added a fresh layer of chaos to an already precarious situation. For the Hittites, it was like hosting a party and having gate crashers show up with a battering ram instead of a bottle of wine. But let's not forget the Assyrians, those perennial party poopers of the ancient world. As the Hittite Empire dealt with internal and external threats, the Assyrians were waiting in the wings, eager to capitalize on their misfortune. With their eyes on Hittite territory, the Assyrians began to chip away at the empire's borders, like a neighbor slowly annexing your backyard, one lorn gnome at a time. The Hittites, stretched to their limits, couldn't muster the strength to fend off this new wave of aggression. And then there's the matter of economics. Remember how the Hittites' economy was propped up by trade and agriculture? Well, as the Bronze Age collapse reshuffled the geopolitical deck, those trade routes became unreliable, and agricultural yields took a hit. The empire's once robust economy was now a shadow of its former self, and no amount of financial wizardry could patch up its leaky coffers. It was a harsh reminder that even the most powerful empires are at the mercy of forces beyond their control. By 1178 BCE, the Hittite Empire was a shell of its former self. The capital, Hadusa, once a bustling hub of power and prestige, lay abandoned, its walls crumbling, its streets silent. The fall of Hadusa marked the end of the Hittites as a major power, but their influence didn't vanish overnight. Far from it. The Hittite legacy seeped into the cultures that followed, like ink spreading across a page. Their innovations in law, warfare, and diplomacy left an indelible mark on history. The Hittites may have exited the stage, but their ideas lived on, influencing later empires that would rise from the ashes of the Bronze Age collapse. The Assyrians, for instance, adopted some Hittite military tactics, while the concept of international treaties, pioneered by the Hittites with their Egyptian counterparts, echoed down the ages, proving that diplomacy could be as powerful as any weapon. So, what can we take away from the Hittite story? It's a tale of resilience and adaptability, of an empire that rose to greatness through cunning and innovation, but ultimately succumbed to forces beyond its control. The Hittites remind us that history isn't just a series of conquests and defeats. It's a complex tapestry woven from the threads of human ambition and folly. Their legacy is a testament to the enduring power of ideas, even as the empires that birthed them fade into the annals of time. And as we close the book on the Hittites, let's not forget the lessons they taught us. That the greatest empires are those that can balance strength with wisdom, might with diplomacy, and ambition with humility. The Hittites, in their rise and fall, embody the eternal dance of history, an intricate waltz of power and pragmatism that continues to shape our world today. So, the next time you find yourself pondering the rise and fall of civilizations, remember the Hittites. Their story is a reminder that even in the face of adversity, the seeds of greatness can take root and flourish, leaving a legacy that echoes through the ages.